All right, I think we'll get started. Thank you very much for coming. This is a good sign to see so many of you here tonight, both tonight and for the project in general. Again, my name is Grant King. I am one of the 3 project leads from SERPED on the Mattapoisett Master Plan. I'm here with several staff members whom you'll meet later on. I know that there are at least 2 planning board members from Mattapoisett here tonight, as well as Mary Crane, your planning board administrator. So SERPED, why are we here? Well, the town asked us to serve as your consultants for this project. So think of us as your project assistants or your secretaries. We're going to be helping you identify areas of consensus and your main goals and matching strategies to those goals to make sure that we can make them real to the greatest extent possible. So you're our bosses on this project, you the members of the public and the elected and appointed officials from Mattapoisett. You can see the agenda here tonight. It's very basic. We just want to give you a better sense of the project itself, of the timeline, show you ways to participate above and beyond this evening. And really the main event, the main focus is to listen to you, to begin to discover Mattapoisett through your eyes and through your priorities. That's what tonight is all about. So when we talk about a discovery workshop, we're really talking about vision, a vision for the master plan. What exactly does this mean? It's your big picture goals, your guiding principles, the main themes you guys want to address, areas of consensus for this project. It's really those principles that will determine the course of the project over the next 24 months. So that's what tonight is about. Tonight's focus is vision. For those of you who are detail oriented or hungry for data, rest assured we will get there, and we'll really get our hands dirty with a lot of specialized information for the specialized workshops that you see here on this timeline. This timeline illustrates the loose sort of way that the project will proceed. It also illustrates the main chapters or elements of a master plan, and these are required by Massachusetts state law. So vision is one of those required elements, as is implementation. But when you think of the main subject matter for a master plan, you're thinking of land use, housing, economic development, open space and recreation, and natural and cultural resources, transportation and circulation and services and facilities. For a coastal community like Mattapoisett, it's just a no-brainer to add an extra element about climate and resiliency. So we'll add that to the project. So those are the specialized chapters of a master plan, and these are the specialized events where we will really dive deep into that subject matter. Another thing to consider when you think about master plans and master plan elements and chapters is, sometimes it's hard to fit an idea neatly into one of these categories. So I kind of invite you to have a flexible mind about this. Let's take an example of a well-known, well-loved project in your town, the Mattapoisett bike path. On its face, that would be a transportation and circulation project, but it also has aspects of open space and recreation. It also, you can think of it in terms of land use and placemaking and connecting places. In the case of the part of the path that is in the industrial park along Industrial Drive, it's also connected to a big infrastructure, water sewer project and the shared use path that goes through that roadway. It's such a big focus for town. You could also argue that it's part of the town's culture. So, I want you to kind of think about those connections when an idea comes to you tonight. Think about the multiple ways that a project or a goal could fit into this master plan. So that's the proposed timeline and shape of the project over the next 24 months. And it really starts in earnest tonight. In the meantime, before we get to those specialized events and before we hear from you, we wanted to show you a couple other ways that we'd invite you to contact the project team and to interact with us. I hope you've already visited the webpage. This should look familiar. There are multiple ways to provide your ideas and your input. It's through the master plan survey. We already have about 70 responses there. That's excellent. It's through the Facebook page and Instagram, which I know has a pretty sizable following. You can contact us on the project listening line or directly contact any of us at the Gmail account or at our work emails, which we'll show you in a moment. We also invite you to explore, if you haven't already done so, all of the interactive maps and data that are on the web page. You know, we will refine and ideally perfect all of this information as it makes its way into the plan and informs all of our decision making. So let us know what we have missed, what we should add, subtract. The planning board has been active helping us do this, but we invite members of the public as well to help us improve this information. We also invite you to check out our frequently asked questions. You know, we may not cover everything in detail tonight, but there's a lot of information about implementation of a master plan and what the final document might look like on both the workshop webpage, which I'll show you in a moment, and on the main project webpage. So if you still have questions after you consult that, reach out to us, ask us. We might be able to add another frequently asked question. Or contact your elected and appointed officials. I know many of them are here tonight. Let them know what you think about this project. Let them know your ideas. That's another clear way to inform the work. And then, so this event, we'll get to your ideas and what this event will look like in just a moment, but there will be a twin workshop on Saturday for those residents and business owners that couldn't join us tonight. There's also a rolling, at least 14-day online component to this. There are two main exercises to that at that big blue URL there, Mattapoisett Master Plan /Discovery Workshop. So we really invite you to also share your ideas there. There's a ranking exercise that looks at the past 20 years of planning in Mattapoisett. There's a mapping exercise that really helps us understand places in town. And there are two how-to videos for both of those exercises that can show you, walk you through exactly how to participate and the nuts and bolts of both of those activities. And then lastly, so you have three main project leads here, several SERP staff, which we're going to break out into groups and facilitate 2 rooms of conversations. But your main project leads are here, Lizeth Gonzalez, myself, Grant King, and Taylor Perez. We are your SERP points of contact, and then obviously you all know how to contact your planning board and your planning director through the town webpage. So any of us will all be working together to work on this plan. So that's it for me. That's the presentation. You can now immediately delete all of that from your memory because none of it is required for you to successfully participate tonight. All we're going to do is have a chat with you about your main priorities and your main goals. So what we're going to do is briefly, Lizeth Gonzalez is going to explain kind of how to use Zoom and how the breakout groups will work and how to mute and unmute yourselves and raise your hands. And then we're going to break up into rooms and have a chat with you and go through some questions and otherwise just get a sense of that vision that you have for your community. So with that, I'll pass it to Lizeth before we break out into our groups.
Sure. So before we break out, I just want to go over a little bit of protocol and etiquette in case if anyone's new to this or isn't too familiar with Zoom. So we ask that so that way we can put a name to the voice or the face, whichever you prefer. Introduce yourself the first time that you're speaking to us, or if you have a comment or question. You don't have to do it every time. And make sure to raise your hand so that way we know who's trying to speak. And that way we're not talking over each other. It just creates a little bit of order. And feel free to enter comments into the chat. That's another way to get in contact with us during the Zoom. And if you are not speaking, we do ask that you mute yourself just so that way we can eliminate any background noise and we can hear everyone as clearly as possible.
Excellent. So we're going to go ahead. Sarah Brown from SERP team is going to break us up into groups, and we'll continue the conversation from there. We thank you all very much for coming, and the crowd is really excellent. It bodes well for tonight and for the project. All right. So thanks again to all of you who are here tonight. Basically what we'd like to do is before we open the floor up to you, I'd like to show you all of the content that we'd like to cover today. And that way you can get a sense of the broad subject matter that the master plan considers and what we hope to be, what we hope to focus on. And then we can go in order. This is sort of the traditional order of a master plan, or we can certainly take any order that you guys choose as a group. Again, I want to overemphasize the fact that you guys are our bosses here, and we're here to listen to you. So master plans talk about land use. What is that? Those are patterns and places and the ways in which land is used or is not used in a community. It covers economic development. So these are typically public investments and public programs that lead to jobs and to tax revenue and community development. We talk about housing in a master plan. That's both market rate and subsidized dwelling units that serve a variety of households and needs in a community. And then this optional element that we've added, the climate and resilience, that's protection against things like storms or sea levels or other hazards, pandemics. It's the ability to adapt and to recover from these events as a community. We think about open space and recreation. So those are undeveloped areas that have either already existing or potential interest for conservation or for recreation. We have natural and cultural resources. So these are valuable features in your community, ranging from habitats and aquifers to historic homes to well-loved businesses to the way you live and experience your town. We have transportation and circulation. So those are simply roads, paths, sidewalks, and the many ways that all types of users move about your community. And then we have services and facilities. Those are town-owned, town-run places and activities. So, we've got we've got a lot of ground to cover here, and we have these guiding questions. But I'm certainly, if somebody wants to recommend a place to start, I'll open it up that way, or we can certainly just ask some basic questions in the first category, which is land use. Anybody want to be brave and start? Let's see, I'm looking at everybody on the screen here. I might call on Mr. Ketchel. I know you're a planning board member. Would you like to get us started?
Let's see if I can find the unmute. One of the things that intrigues me is economic development and the potential for so much more likely out of the industrial park, but also the potential for maybe less of an industrial, but potential commercial, like office type buildings in town.
So economic development in the industrial park, but also in other places in town. And did you have any thoughts? That's a nice place-specific idea to kind of talk about. Are there any other areas in town that the town is currently focusing on, or that you, other residents, would like to see typical office or business park type growth take place?
Right, great. Are you asking me specifically or everybody out there?
Yeah, anyone. So I want you guys to think of this as no worries. I want you guys to think of this as a chat, right? So this is, please interrupt, please raise your hand, please let us know. Everybody's ideas are welcome.
Remember to take yourself off mute.
Yeah, there's also the raise. Go ahead.
The raise hand feature for sure. I just want to say, maybe to get some ideas flowing, as Grant mentioned, we did put out a survey, and maybe I can just give you guys an idea of what people are saying so far, and you can tell me whether or not you agree with it, whether or not you don't, and that's actually really useful feedback as well. So 66% of respondents so far have said they're interested in enlivening the village center. Does that mean commercial for you guys, or what do you think about that?
How do you define commercial?
I guess it's how you define it as well.
Certainly, yeah. I mean, it could range from services and, you know, restaurants and the sort of quaint things that I think of when I think of Mattapoisett Village, or it could be higher scale, higher intensity uses like Mr. Ketchell mentioned for the industrial park. Although, you know, that clearly would be a questionable idea for the village, but it can mean anything. These are your ideas we're interested in.
I like the idea of like small businesses and independently owned private businesses.
I actually live in the village area, and I'd like to see more like pop-up type things, not things that are, you know, built to last forever, but more even like, say, food trucks or, you know, like special event, just, you know, one day happening. Make it a little bit more lively without making it totally commercial.
Sure.
I would
Do you
be
know?
curious.
Go ahead.
I would be curious in terms of what the zoning allows in terms of businesses within homes, particularly in a post-COVID environment with working at home. Do we have zoning? Is it overly restrictive in terms of allowing home-based businesses? Is that something we could be looking at?
Yeah, and that was one of the priorities from the previous master plan, was making sure it was as easy as possible to do business from your home. That's certainly something that we could explore if we hear that has either is not as effective as it could be, or has you know, desired to be changed from the public, from you guys and from the planning board. So home-based businesses, particularly post-COVID.
This is
Yeah,
Shay. I'd like to see more development along the Route 6 stretch to make it more of a community rather than just a strip of asphalt, which it seems mostly to me. The village seems pretty much, in my view, well developed. There's not much room for expansion, certainly, of new businesses there. But that Route 6 strip, you know, narrowing down the entrance and exit from a lot of those shops, putting some flower boxes in, making it more of a community rather than just a bunch of stores lined up. Potentially even a parking lot, and then people walk to the different stores rather than go into each one. And in more urban environments, that's very common.
excellent. That's excellent. So those types of, you know, aspirations and those hopes are exactly what we want to hear from you. So that's really an excellent comment. All the other things were as well, but I want to kind of highlight what we're looking for from you guys today, is that type of true hopes. Yeah, Ms. Trish, I see your hand.
Right. She started in on what I was thinking about, but I would like to see the two business districts better connected so that people can get between the two areas, and it's more villagey on both, echoing whatever. I don't know who it was that was speaking, but I'm echoing that. I would love to see a wider median strip and not the 3 or 4 lanes going through town, but that may be a traffic management issue that I'm not familiar with. Coming out to Route 6, yes, more village, something that looks more like the village does down by the wharf. I recognize, I don't want to see any roads widened down in that part of town at all, but I do want to see things. Part of what drew us here, we've only been here 3 years, we moved here from Hawaii. Part of what drew us to this particular community was the community feel actually down closer to the wharf because we stayed down there. So I'd like to see that built upon. And then to Nate's point, I think there's some restriction out there in the industrial park just because of water table maybe.
Are you outside?
And I would like to see us explore maybe solar energy out there or some sort of energy that could be put into the park. It could be put above that water table.
Well, I think the water table thing that you discussed is more in relation to the limitation of building in there associated with septic systems, which I understand the town is going to be connecting all of that area to sewer. So that, I think, kind of opens up the zoning area that is zoned as industrial to be able to be built out.
Yeah, one of the projects that I alluded to when I was talking about the bike path is just that. It's a sewer extension down Industrial Drive, actually going from east to west from the Bay Club, which is already sewered. And I know the town has already received a significant amount of U.S. economic development assistance funding through SERPED to move that project forward. So that sewer project would remove some of those limitations that would on development that the water table and that septic placed on it. Yeah, this is excellent. So are there any other thoughts before I sort of pivot to another? Yes, Steve's.
Yeah, the Jed's Route 6 study, I've been a little negligent, but I think the findings of what they recommended, how Route 6 gets treated through Mattapoisett would drive a lot of what we're talking about here, particularly this segment through the downtown or along the village, and how that, I'd like to know how that fits into the master plan.
So there, for those of you who don't know, that was sponsored by Mass DOT and conducted by SERPED staff that sort of looked at options for Route 6 from Fairhaven all the way to Wareham. And there was a significant public outreach and 2 big meetings that were attended. And so there were there are sort of ideal ways to deal with Route 6. And then there are the ways that fit within the state design standards. Because it is a numbered state road, there are pretty strict limitations on what can happen in the roadway itself. And so that study, that Route 6 study, limited itself to those state design principles and limitations. Now, it doesn't have to be limited to that. Certainly your imaginations and the way that you would hope that Route 6 passes through and by, particularly the village, we want to hear more of what that ideal situation is. The constraint, however, is that in order for some of those true roadway realignments to take place, is that the town would have to take ownership over that portion of Route 6 or all of Route 6 in town, which would put the burden not only to maintain the roadway, but also liability, insurance liability on the town. So that's a heavy lift for the community. That's a good example of some of, Steve, that's a good example of some of the really detailed kind of heavy information we would get into for the transportation element. But I don't want to like artificially constrain your guys' imaginations today because we're talking about the Mass DOT design guidelines, right? So I'm much more interested in hearing what Ms. Terse has to say about the wider median, something that belongs more in Mattapoisett. Was that clear?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I don't want to say that the facts don't matter, but they matter less at this phase of the project than they will in a few months.
Ms. Terse, did you have another, raise your hand again?
Just another thought. Yes,
Sure.
I didn't really raise my hand. I was just thinking.
Okay.
And it's the Route 6 thing. I watch people struggle to cross that, sometimes with bicycles, sometimes with walkers. And I don't really want to see the lift go to Mattapoisett town. I would like to see the state accommodate us in whatever way they can. I know it gets particularly busy. Some people pay attention to the crosswalk with the flashers. Mm-hmm. I've had friends that have waited at the crosswalk with the flashers going and nobody stops. So I don't know what the solution is, but it's not very pedestrian friendly. Right now in the time of COVID, it's not very bike friendly. I've watched, groups of 12 or so teenagers roll through there thinking they own it, and they don't realize they're in the middle of the street.
Yeah, I think, especially in the post-COVID world, a lot of, focus will be on ped and bike accommodations. So that's something that definitely we can look at.
Yeah, because the bike path is a fact of life, and
Yep.
more people have gotten bicycles during the COVID
Sure.
times. I think they're going to continue to ride them. Some people don't know how to ride them and don't know where they're supposed to ride them and don't know which side of the road they're supposed to be on, but we'll get there eventually.
Agreed.
It makes you feel better. There are no crosswalks in the west end of town for crossing.
West end of town, where are you? Oh, yeah, particularly by Mattapoisett Diner.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It's
That's
a struggle there.
Yeah, my husband and I did kind of mediated or whatever, the bike race and the driver last year, the Tour de Creme, and getting people across that road safely was a real struggle, even with a cop on duty.
I would also echo that the ability to cross by the Mattapoisett Diner to get to the bike trail, and also even over by Old Hammondtown School, as well as Reservation Beach. I have a 10-year-old daughter who kind of fears crossing Route 6 because she had a close call one day. In town, they now have that flashing crosswalk right by the bank and post office area. If there was something like that in the other section, that would be very valuable.
Again, this is
May I suggest, sorry to interrupt, may I suggest that, I'm seeing your name, Miss Walsh, may I suggest that you definitely flag those places to us, the specific places in that mapping exercise that we talked about in the main group presentation. We'd love to see exactly where these places are. And that's for all of you. We're looking for those place specific down to the crosswalk level where you guys think there are problems or needed solutions.
town also recently did a complete streets plan, so some of these recommendations may be included in a complete streets plan the town recently completed.
Yeah, and I think it was also, a lot of these locations were flagged when the DOT presentations were occurring regarding the possible reworking of Route 6.
Good.
Yeah, the Bike Ped Committee looks at Route 6 a lot. And we identified, I think, about 20 different points in town where there are some issues, and an awful lot of them were crossing points along Route 6 and the danger of getting across the Mattapoisett Diner, Brant Point Road. But there's been some work done by the Bike Ped Committee in an application to the state that identifies a lot of those problem areas along Route 6.
Excellent. So we have that.
Yeah, so it seems like we've,
Go ahead, Lizette. Yeah.
go ahead.
No, you.
I was just gonna say, it seems like we've transitioned a little bit into transportation, which is great. You know, I like that we're bouncing around a little bit. So we can continue talking about this, and please highlight if there are any specific locations. We can talk about them now, but as Grant mentioned, point them out in the map too. That'll be super helpful as well.
Yeah, and Steve, if at all possible, we have the complete streets planning, or the prioritization plan, but any documents that, are you on the Bike Ped Committee or anyone here that is?
I am, and I can get you. We submitted an application for 3 projects, but they were culled from a list of about 20 plus projects that we looked at. So
Okay.
I can get that to you.
Yes, please. That'd be great. That'd be great. But I can't
Actually,
I'd love for you guys to put those places on the map. The more information we get, the more times that pops as a priority, the clearer the emphasis is on that solution for the master plan. Are there any other main?
Are you ready for a complete change of subject?
Yeah, do it.
Sorry, I lost my audio.
Yes, change the subject. We'll come back to Mr. Smith. Anybody else want to continue to talk about transportation or change?
I have an occasional unstable connection here. My subject is
Oh, rats. Lost you again. Steve, we lost you again. We're going to come back to you, okay?
Actually, Grant, I don't know if you're aware, but Barry Denham had come before the planning board recently regarding a sidewalk project on the west side of Mattapoisett Neck Road, which would basically tie into that kind of River Road, Mattapoisett Diner kind of intersection. So I don't know if he gets the funding, if there was some sort of ability to prioritize a crossing at that location.
Okay.
Or, sorry, sidewalk project at Mattapoisett Neck Road.
And who was the that came before the planning board?
Barry Denham, the highway surveyor.
Was that a complete streets project on the west side of Mattapoisett Neck Road?
To be honest with you, I don't know. We didn't really get into the specifics of how it was coming to fruition. There was some sort of, I don't know if it was state or federal grants that if they had a shovel-ready project that they would get prioritization for funding. So I don't know where the recommendation came from initially.
That sounds complete streets to me.
Yeah. Maybe we can follow up with Barry.
We'll follow up.
Yeah, or if Steve's on the committee, maybe when he gets back, he can confirm it.
Mary Lou just commented. Yeah, she said that it was a complete streets project, and she'd heard that the funding effort had failed.
Okay, just strike that all out, Grant.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not. So if it appears, if it's on the town's approved complete streets prioritization plan, then it's well on its way to being funded under the Mass DOT Complete Streets funding program. So we just have to, we'll do some research and try and track down exactly what went wrong, if it did, and where it stands in that process.
And it's competitive, and you might be able to apply for it next year. So it's not, it's not off the table. You keep it on the table.
I saw Donna Shea. I think I saw you with your.
Yeah, I was just going to say my personal preference for a long-term plan is to add sidewalks wherever we can. I know some people prefer that they not go into their private property, but I live out at the end of Mattapoisett Neck Road, and this proposed sidewalk, my understanding, was going to stop at the bike path. But there's people walk on the whole Neck Road, Mattapoisett Neck Road, all the time, and there's no place for them to walk. So they're always in the road, and bikes are always in the road, and traffic has to go around them, and it's really unsafe. I would just like a general policy of the town that they would try to encourage sidewalks, have someone look for funding, plan for that going forward over the long run, wherever they can put it. Because we're a very mobile walking community, and sidewalks make it safer, so much safer. Or bike lanes, one or the other. People can walk on bike lanes maybe.
I had to leave you for a while because my connection was no good, but I am back. And I will say the Bike Ped Committee did make application to do some sidewalks, but they were very limited and in the village area.
Oh, so it wasn't the complete street script that had recommended the sidewalk on Mattapoisett Neck?
There were improvements on Mattapoisett Neck Road where the bike path crossing was, but I don't think we recommended sidewalk improvements.
Just going to read a message here from Cindy Turris. She wrote in the chat, when we do discuss Mattapoisett Neck Road to address pedestrians, bicycles, and cars, she also notes the speed limit does vary significantly up and down the road, and the highest miles per hour is on the wider side, I believe. It says wider side of the bike path.
Okay, excellent.
So it seems to be the vehicle speed varies on that road.
She's probably referring to either side. So from
I thank you.
Route 6.
Either side. Okay. Sorry. Mhm.
Yeah, because from Route 6, I think basically to just past the Mattapoisett landing area is 40 miles per hour. It then drops down to, I think, 25 miles per hour and then goes back up. I was involved in an effort a couple of years ago with Bonnie de Souza on getting Neck Road, the speed limit on Neck Road lowered, but it became apparently too much of an issue because there were traffic studies done, and I guess they're limited to what the traffic study would allow.
I'm interested to probe a little bit more into this desire to, you described yourselves as such a mobile walking community. And the third question here, you forgive me for observing that the average age of the participant here is, is pretty high. So I'd like to ask you seniors if you feel like you have safe, non-automobile alternatives. And it sounds to me like specifically in parts of your town, you don't. But so do you have transit or multimodal options? And apart from what we've already discussed, is there a way that the master plan can help meet those unmet needs? Yeah, Miss Marlowe. See, you have to unmute yourself, ma'am. There we go.
Is that better?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, perfect.
The Council on Aging does provide rides for seniors, and they do a lot of it. It's not as much now because of the COVID, and there are only 3 people are allowed on the bus, the bus that we have. But that's for seniors. It's not for just plain non-drivers. But they definitely provide rides to medical appointments, and they do a couple of times a week to the grocery store. They do various things, and they do trips, but a lot of that's on hold right now because of the pandemic.
Right. And those medical trips, they're to New Bedford, to Wareham, to how far do they go?
They even go up to Boston.
Okay.
I believe some people have been to Providence. That was a while back, but as long as the arrangements are made far enough in advance.
Is that in partnership with the Southeastern Regional Transit Agency, with SRTA, or is it all through?
No, that's strictly Council on Aging.
Great. Great. So and you find, are you involved with the Council on Aging?
Yes, with outreach.
Okay, excellent. I met with your director a few months, I guess it was last fall. I've forgotten her name right now.
Jackie Cucci.
Jackie. And, I encourage, this is, your community, the median age in Mattapoisett over the last 10 years has risen by 10 years. It went from about 42 to 52. So you're a community with a lot of seniors, and that proportion of seniors is going up. So representation from the Council on Aging is going to be huge for this process. So if you can share that workshop, the website where people can comment, or simply our phone numbers, the emails, that would be great. We need to hear from seniors in town.
Well, I've been making a lot of calls in the last few months, and I have been shocked with a number of people in their 90s in Mattapoisett, and even several over 100. And they're quite involved. It's very interesting. One 92-year-old lady told me that she'd just gotten off of 30 minutes on the treadmill. So I was like, I think I need to go walk now.
A very active community, yeah.
Yes.
So I have a question. You mentioned that obviously pre-COVID there was this service. Do you know what resources people have when that service is not available? Do you know if they rely on their other community members, or how are they accessing forms of transportation when, say, they don't have access to a car or they can't drive themselves?
Well, they call the Council on Aging and it gets set up. But I'm sure there are times when that doesn't work out. But there's several drivers, and there are a couple of cars and a van. And so it's just not happening as often for as many people now as it was.
Okay.
And I think it will be that way for a while. But they've been very good about providing transportation for people who need it and who call needing it.
Would you say that there's more demand than there is supply, or the availability of folks, to get around? I assume so, especially in the COVID era now.
Yes. Yes.
Pre-COVID, was there sufficient, or was there more demand?
I think it was sufficient pre-COVID.
Okay.
Okay. And Mary Lou in the chat actually just commented that there are no public transit services in Mattapoisett. Is there a need for that? Do people feel that way, or are we as is okay?
I mean, I think CERTA has on occasion run maybe a bus or two throughout the day. And if there currently isn't, I thought there had been a revived effort maybe last year or the year before to at least run one or two a day that would eventually end up at the New Bedford bus terminal and then able to branch from there. But if in fact it's not running now or was canceled, I mean, then it kind of sounds like the demand wasn't there for the one or two buses per day that were being offered like last year.
I'm not sure. I'll have to. Does the town have demand response through CERTA services? The dial-a-ride, or what you'd call, and they'd come and pick you up at a predetermined time at your house and bring you to a medical appointment or something. Corrine, do you know if
I'm
CERTA
sorry.
provides any?
I'm sorry. I turned away and was writing, and I didn't hear the question.
Sure, no problem. Does I don't know, but does CERTA provide on-demand response if somebody can call CERTA?
Mary,
Not that I'm aware of.
yeah,
Nothing like that. Okay.
And I think the problem with CERTA is when they do provide, or if they do provide, it's very, very scarce.
Okay.
And you might be picked up in the morning at 8:15 or something, but you don't get a ride back until 5 that afternoon or something.
Okay.
Okay.
So it makes it's difficult.
Inconvenient.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
it sounds
just
like it.
I just pulled up the CERTA and Gatra buses website, and they do list a Monday through Friday service, leaving the Bedford terminal at 7:30 and 9:30, and then leaving Cranberry Plaza in Wareham at 8:30 and 10:30, with a stop in each of the towns along the route.
Right.
I was going to say, I did just see someone sort of flag down the bus near the Mattapoisett Diner. They had their bicycle and they kind of motioned so the bus knew to pick them up. So I just moved back in town, but I have seen the bus.
So that's that New Bedford
Yeah,
where,
so actually,
and what I'm hearing is it doesn't run enough to be convenient, right? So if you go early in the morning, you can't get home until the evening.
Yes.
Right.
well,
Okay, shall we move on and change the subject dramatically, or are there any other thoughts on transit and the way the transportation system in general serves seniors in town?
well, do we have to limit it to seniors?
No, certainly not. No, sir.
I mean, obviously, I think one of the biggest priorities should be completing the bike path. I mean, it seems like with the phase 2 being done between Neck Road and Depot Street, and I believe there is funding to do the portion from funding is impending from the Mariontown line back into the industrial park, and then it gets tied into that whole other improvements project. But then, there is that big segment that needs to be done between either the Industrial Park Road or the Park and Ride, and then tie into either Route 6 or into Depot Street in some way. So I don't know if there are efforts in town right now to fund the design and obviously the funding to complete that part. But I think that should be a major priority for the town.
Bonnie Souza is obviously the go-to person for that, but I believe that segment would be an on-road. You know, there would not be a dedicated right of way for that segment of the bike path. It would have to be on town streets.
Really, they couldn't use the railroad right away?
Excuse me?
They wouldn't be able to access. I had been under the impression that they would cross Route 6, enter the former railroad right of way, bring it past the I guess it's now Townland, but probably known as the Holy Ghost site, and bring it up to the Park and Ride from there. That's not the case? It has to be on street?
I really don't know. I'd have to.
My understanding is that those are two alternatives under consideration, and there's a lot to be worked out for phase 2. But I've clearly marked that that should be a priority, the whole project, and figuring out route phase 2 for sure. Let's see. Lizeth, would you help us work through the chats? I think you're muted, Lizeth.
Yeah, I can help out.
Sorry about that.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, no, Mary Lou mentioned that conceptual discussions have started, but there's no conceptual design right now for that.
Cindy noted, does anyone know what's happening with Bullmore parking, small shopping center with extra parking? Will be bike racks around town? Those all seem like very good questions.
Since these are in the chat, they'll be saved, and we'll look into this, Cindy. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Any other ideas before we sort of change the subject? We're about halfway through the conversation. I want to make sure we hit as many of these elements as possible. Yes, Ms. Marlowe.
I was just going to say, I've started writing and I'm going to have to get off the call shortly. But I've heard some complaints about how many trees and how much greenery was cut down for the extension of the bike path. And I wonder if there are any, in terms of climate control and also visually, is there any plans to add anything there? Any trees or bushes or anything?
Where were excessive trees removed for the bike path?
I'm not the one who was on it, but I've heard a couple of people complain that too much greenery is gone.
So I know I don't have a response to that. I'm not aware of what plans they have for like vegetation, but if that's something that you want to see, that definitely plays into this discussion of, town beautification, recreation. It's not just having those paths, it's making them attractive to people, make them want to use them. So if that's something that you want to see, that's definitely something to consider.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you can remember who made those concerns and complaints, please let them know about that mapping exercise that we mentioned, and they can just simply drop a point on the map and show us where that problem is.
Okay.
This is Mary Kate Bryant. I bet you it's down Goodspeed Island Road there. When the first time I walked down, I was just shocked at how it looked like the Braga Bridge was dumped on the beach. It's just that stock of a, when you first see it, it was all for the bike path, but when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, what did we vote for? Because it's horrendous looking initially, but I think the vegetation will come back and start masking some of it eventually. That's probably
okay. I hadn't heard you before, but that's pretty much what I'd heard.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Right.
Should we move on to another topic, Grant?
Yes.
Can I
Um,
suggest one?
yeah.
I wanted to talk about resiliency planning for climate change and sea level rise. And I know that Serpent did the Marion master plan, and they have a village situation very similar to ours, a historic village on the water. So I'm curious what Serpent recommended for resiliency recommendations for Marion that might be applicable to Mattapoisett.
You put me on the spot, Steve.
Grant, before we get into that, Mary Lou left a comment. We can address that. Again, we're keeping the record of all the comments. She had some notes about North Street, but we can get into that. I just wanted to let you know we did see your comment, Mary Lou. So, sorry, Grant.
No problem. So, right, I was on this project team, and that master plan took place over the course of about 36 months from 2015 to roughly late 2017, 2018, that ballpark. And right, it did also include a climate resilience element where the town had not had this analysis done before, to my memory, the best of my knowledge, where we looked at critical infrastructure that would be affected by certain levels of sea level rise that we sort of called near term, mid-term, and long term, or you could correlate that to storm events. And there were a range of options that the plan recommended, from relocating some roadways to protecting them, to managed retreat. In some cases, truly low-lying areas. I can't remember specific interventions that were just for the village, but we certainly can consult that plan. I guess the good news is Mattapoisett has already done a lot of the analysis that we would need to consult to make those types of determinations for this master plan. In other words, you guys are ahead of the game. You've already done some of that vulnerability analysis about roads and structures that would be threatened. The idea is to get out ahead of it. So that kind of leads us to the first question there is, what areas in town do you feel are critical when considering high priority improvements or activities to make it more resilient? And the recent municipal vulnerability preparedness planning in town has already identified those key infrastructures. There are water mains and sewer mains on right along the coast and on riverways. But we'd be interested to hear, not just from those plans, but from what you guys think should be high priority to protect. Is it the village? This village is right on the harbor, so it would certainly be in a flood zone.
Mary Kate Bryan again, I think the biggest vulnerability is the pumping station, the sewage pumping station that's, it's on a little spit of an island at Eel Pond there. It's probably very vulnerable.
If you're exactly on point, Mary. It's Eel Pond, I guess that pumping station itself, as well as some of the mains, are identified as high priority, needs to be, if not relocated, then reinforced. Roadways, the village, put you back on the spot, Steve. Do you have any ideas about interventions or changes, short of a seawall, that the town could consider, particularly for the village and for?
I do not. I would only say the village is obviously the most vulnerable place in town. I'm thinking about that hurricane that's Laura that's hitting the Gulf Coast now in a 15-foot surge, and I'm thinking what that would be like in Mattapoisett, but we don't want to go there, do we?
I mean, yeah, it'd be catastrophic. Yeah, there's like so much that the planning and the town investments can do for situations like that.
Right.
You have to assess your vulnerability and how you would respond.
And I don't know whether, what we're looking at 100 years from now, so maybe something comparable. But I don't have any recommendations. I'd only say the village is, I think, the most vulnerable, and needs to be looked at.
I used to live out on Crescent Beach. I'm in the village now, but I had a property on Crescent Beach for 40 years or so. And while they're actually in better space than the next beach up, Point Connett can get totally isolated if that one strip of Angelica Avenue gets wiped out. And I know it's been controversial, but there's land issues or whatever, but I still think it might be, for safety reasons, a better plan they can put a roadway for those people to be able to, in an emergency, get out, connected over to Harbor Beach. I think they need a second means of egress. Crescent Beach is also vulnerable, but Point Connett is much more so if that one strip of Angelica would be lost in a storm.
So help me with these place names, Mary. I'm still getting to, part of this discovery workshop is us discovering the town. I'm still getting to know all of these place names. So you've mentioned Crescent Beach, Harbor Beach.
And Point Connett. You can't get, technically by car, you can't get from Point Connett to Harbor Beach, but you can walk there along sand. But if you come off Route 6 at Prospect Road, which is just past Gulf Hill, Oxford Creamery, sorry, I'm old. But if you go up and you go along, you come through what they call the Cedars, and then it turns and it goes Crescent Beach, and then it goes over some marshland, and it goes up to Point Connett. There are two creeks, one between the Cedars and Crescent Beach, and one between Crescent Beach and Point Connett. And in Hurricane Bob, both of those flooded out. And so Point Connett was isolated and Crescent Beach was isolated. And unfortunately, a friend of mine was badly injured, and they had to float him on surfboards or kayaks or something to get him over the washed out area to get to a waiting ambulance. So those are two areas that can get isolated if the water comes in. And there's more land surrounding the Crescent Beach Creek. It's a little bit more substantial land base, but up between Crescent and Point Connett, there's one section that is very, very narrow. If that were to totally, wash out, then Point Connett would not have any street access at all. But like I said, there is more of a land mass between them and Harbor Beach, but currently there is no, that I know of, there is no actual roadway between those two sections.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll consult the mapping and analysis that's already been done in town, and then I'll run this by our crew and our maps, and we'll be sure to explore all of that and include it in the resilient planning thinking for the master plan. Thank you for all that detail.
Yeah, and then there are multiple instances like that. Mattapoisett Neck. There's probably like a 700-foot segment that's kind of a causeway built up on a marsh that then goes to some upland and then does another 600 to 700-foot run over marsh. If I'm sure during Hurricane Bob, those areas became isolated, and my recollection all the way back to 91 was that the roadways made it, but it doesn't mean that they're going to make it during the next storm event.
Sure,
so there are a lot of road crossings that are like this, where they are low lying in the 7 to 8 foot, above sea level range that are currently just built up on whatever fill material they had at the time. They're not made to survive sea level rise or storms in the future.
That particular area Nathan just mentioned, they do have markers on the telephone poles for 2 of the hurricanes that show the water height.
Yeah.
I've seen those in town. Yeah.
We have some.
And maybe.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Sorry, maybe we can get a little bit more context. Cindy mentioned in the chat, and forgive my pronunciation if this is completely correct, Antassawamak. Does that have a history of having been isolated or damaged in past storms? And could anyone describe that a little bit?
Antassawamek would be part of the portion of Mattapoisett Neck that's furthest to the south, so furthest out on the peninsula into Buzzards Bay. And
Okay.
Antassawamek, the Harbor Road area, and then I don't know what the this other area would be called, but all of those areas would be part of those areas that would get isolated by these two kind of low-lying areas of the roadway.
Okay, great, thank you. And Cindy also mentioned Molly's Cove and reiterated for Harbor Cove as well.
Molly's Cove would be the portion that I couldn't think of a name of before. It's kind of the upland area between these two kind of causeway locations.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, when we think of climate and resiliency, we want to think about, you know, we don't want to have to be in those situations, but we do kind of have to put ourselves in that mindset a little bit of the what if. And that's really helpful in these situations because we can think about how to be prepared for them, but also how to mitigate the damage if you know, it really does occur and there's no time to prep for it. So part of resiliency is being able to bounce back.
While we're in resiliency, may I ask you the number two question here is, do all residents in town have access to, you know, proper heating and cooling and adequate insulation and flood protections? You know, when we think of resiliency, we think of these catastrophic events, but there are also just ways to be resilient in our daily lives. So do residents in town have what they need?
Well, in terms of proper heating and cooling, I mean, I'm sure there are many cottages and whatnot that are seasonal that, you know, wouldn't have a heating system. Who knows about cooling, but I mean, for year-round residents, I would say that it's probably they probably do have adequate.
So yeah, this sort of is one of those situations where we can think about this in multiple master plan elements. I'm thinking about housing, and I know that the housing stock in Mattapoisett is on average quite old, and in many cases the residents in those houses are also aging with the household. So sometimes there are programs to help residents in those situations pay for deferred maintenance to improve those types of, you know, to meet those needs that aren't currently being met, to make accessibility improvements like ramps or new stairways to their homes. So that's sort of the essence of this project, or this question, I should say. Ms. Terse, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Lions Club and the Women's Club and a few other clubs in town. One of the things that I found with Lions when I was doing eye exams in the schools is that the nurse has a good handle on students who might have substandard housing, Section 8 housing, where not necessarily the landlord was complying with what they should be complying with for Section 8 housing. The other thing on Lions has built ramps, so that's one source of help for people who need things like that, or has put in a temporary ramp depending on what the need is. So there are local clubs that will step in and help out.
I believe that the utilities also have a program, you know, National Grid or Eversource have programs for folks who are in need of assistance, either billing or that type of thing. So that's another way. Crystal Walsh said she believes there's a weatherization program to help residents. Is that a town program, Crystal, or?
I'm not really sure the details. Okay. For a little while, my home was a rental, and I know my tenant got information about it. She may have been low income, and that might have been how she received info.
Okay. Well, there's also
it
the
all
Mass
had
Save
to be approved through me as landlord, but
sure. There's also the Mass Save program, which anybody who's part of the utility paying customer, and usually, you can get a lot of whether insulation, that type of thing, savings for minimal cost. So
Yeah.
could have been
So, part of
that program.
a fact-finding mission, rest assured that we have a pretty good handle on all of these programs and how to match them to, how to combine them to housing needs based on income or just on age of properties, things like that. And if you look at an example plan that Steve Smith mentioned, the Marion Housing Production Plan and Marion Master Plan, you'll see, those strategies that we can use to meet these goals. I guess, these questions are just, like I'm saying, they're fact finding. We're trying to get a sense from you, if you anecdotally or personally know of any needs that aren't being met, that we can then use to provide not just the data, the quantitative reasoning for participating in these programs, but the qualitative side of things, that, what we're hearing from you as community members. So it's all good. Rest assured that we have a decent handle on the programs that are out there. Just hoping to hear, your assessment of if you need them or not.
And to piggyback on a comment that we just talked about, we mentioned that the Lions Club and all these community groups kind of step in, and we talk about expanding social networks. And that last question there, would you guys say that Mattapoisett is, connected as a community? And is this something that people can rely on during times of emergency if that were to come up?
So, like, for example, so this is the question here. So resilience also encompasses preserving and expanding, social networks and social capital across age and race and income. So how did it feel to live in Mattapoisett if you were there during the first part of this pandemic, for example? How did the community band together? What groups? Was it the Lions Club? Was it the Council on Aging? What groups reached out and provided that social safety net for fellow residents?
I can't think that really there was any great outreach from any organization unless you were a member of the organization. I don't know, but it could have been churches. I think the churches quite often step in. The COA, I think Corrine has left the meeting, but I think the COA made it obvious. And the COA
Mary Lou Newell said the COA did in the chat.
Yeah, COA made daily phone calls because Corrine was making daily phone calls. I'm sorry, I'm pointing behind me because she lives across the street.
Nice.
Shouldn't do that. Nate lives over that way too.
Yeah, I'm pointing in your direction now.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know that we're entirely representative of the population in the town. I think we're missing a lot of layers.
What layers do you think those are?
Parents of school-age children, for one, and school-age children, the students at ORR, or both the middle school and the high school. I think they all perceive the community in different ways, and they need to be talked with at some time.
Excellent.
That's a great observation.
I think a lot of it is individual too, like, the individual neighborhoods and, what people are involved in. If you are by nature before COVID pretty isolated, I'm not sure how much was done to reach out to you, but like myself, I, all of a sudden went from working out of state to working out of my living room. But I have a dog, so I'm out walking every day. So I would see people out walking, and we, people were always asking, are you okay? What do you need? And, so I think there is a good community spirit if you are out and about. I'd be more worried about people who were isolated before. I'm not sure how much outreach there was for that, but like that, there's an elderly gentleman that I know just from church, and so I made sure I called him and found out how he was doing. And during the worst of it, I was calling him at least 2 or 3 times a week just to make sure he was okay. And he doesn't have internet and stuff, so I, a couple times he asked me if he could, I go to order him books or whatever. So I think individuals, remained pretty active and helped out in their neighborhoods. But those people who don't have ties and already established, I'm not sure how things went for them.
Yeah, if I can just follow up on that, I've thought myself that there's a lack of a communication mechanism in the town to relay information. I think mostly it's the wanderer. That's what I kind of rely on. But I'm not sure that that's the best way to, like, for example, I missed the town elections. Apparently we had some earlier a few months ago. I didn't even know they were going on. I didn't even, somehow it wasn't prominent enough. It wasn't brought to my attention enough somehow, or I didn't find it out. And I don't know what the solution, I know there's a town website, but I'm not sure how often that's updated and kept current. Maybe a town listserv. I know I'm on the neighborhood listserv, that's a commercial one, but I just think there could be a better way to have the community more engaged with each other, because I agree it's very neighbor to neighbor, right? It seems to me right now.
Yeah, those are some
I know
great
the
observations.
schools often use like a one-call system. And so maybe some sort of school or not school, phone or text-based notifications could be valuable.
Does the town use Facebook? Are a lot of folks on Facebook? I know in some towns as community, the town has a Facebook page, and it's a community Facebook page is
There's several of them. There's Mattapoisett Life.
pretty popular in many towns.
3 or 4 that I can think of, Facebook pages.
Yeah.
Various levels of usage.
But when it comes to coordination from the town, there isn't one. You got the fire department has theirs and the police department has theirs, but it's not coordinated. We have a new town administrator, so I'm hoping that we'll see some changes there. Mary Lou said that the town website was always up to date, and I have not found it so. Every time I go to look for something, I'm usually calling Mel and saying, okay, what's the real scoop on this? So maybe that's coming too. Maybe that's something that's in process right now as we talk.
Okay.
Yeah, to be honest, I felt like in regard to the elections, I was able to get the information from there pretty regularly on, because I think the election was even delayed over the time, and was able to find through the website the information. And then I believe there is also a town hall Facebook page that is really pretty up to date. Although I think it's more about things like, is it trash week or is it trash and recycling week? I don't think you'd
does that.
Obviously for public hearing type purposes, they need to do the advertising through the town hall, but I don't think you regularly see like an update from their Facebook page saying, hey, there's a conservation hearing tonight, or anything like that.
Yeah, so it sounds like not only just for these, resiliency situations, but also an everyday type of thing, the small details, we're looking for a little bit more communication. If no one has any other comments regarding climate or resiliency, I might suggest moving on to a different topic, just that way we get a chance to talk about the other elements as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, could I ask one question on, actually, if you could scroll up on the Word file?
Sure.
Maybe half a page. I was just curious, under this item number 2, do you feel all residents in town have access to home conditioning tools, and then you name them off. What types of tools would things like flood protections be?
I missed the last part of your question, Nate.
Sorry. Under number 2, these home conditioning tools. What would define a home conditioning tool for flood protections?
So what type of interventions or tools would be available to residents?
Or you asked, do you feel all residents in town have access to home conditioning tools such as proper heating and cooling, adequate insulation, and flood protections?
Okay.
What types of tools
So
would a
what's-
typical homeowner have for flood protection?
Right. What specific interventions? Right. Yeah. Other than architectural changes to their home, probably not much. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if it was like sump pumps or what. So, okay.
Yeah.
It's probably all the building requirements, all the houses that.
Yeah. All the
they
newer
bought
codes.
14 feet or whatever, and you know.
And
Actually,
returning
Grant, as
before we move on to this to a new topic, I'd like to kind of summarize how all of this idea about social capital and community groups and volunteerism might inform the plan if we continue to hear it. A nearby community that we worked with for our master plan, midstream said, look, a lot of what we need is stewardship and service, and that all needs to be coordinated in town, and it can't fall on just elected and appointed officials such as Nate and Mary Crane. There has to be kind of a grassroots organized way for us to come together to meet some of these needs. In this town, it was, trash pickup and kind of eyes on the streets in particular neighborhoods. So this community, halfway through their project, decided to add an additional master plan chapter called just that, Stewardship and Service, where all of these sort of neighborhood specific or topic specific needs that don't have a clear point, a clear lead or a clear municipal point of contact, those could sort of be warehoused and assigned and advanced publicly through the master plan. So that, if we continue to hear the need for this, that might be a way that your community could address it. And Nate, to return to your question, yeah, I don't really know. We'll have to research any, short of structural changes and things like sump pumps and better drainage on your property, French drains, things like that. What we had in mind with that question. I'll admit that our colleague Taylor Perez added that to this, and heating and cooling and insulation and de-leading of paint, ADA, those are clear solutions, but flood protections, I don't have a very clear answer right now. We'll do more research. So let's move.
And then actually, sorry, I don't want to drag this all on, but as part of all of the GIS mapping that, I know you've gone over with us on the planning board many times, is there any way through the data that you guys have, like determine, obviously building codes are changing all the time. And obviously there was some point in time where, with FEMA updates and whatnot, that homes that were either, new construction had to get above the velocity zones and whatnot. Is there any way to break out from that housing stock GIS map, like age of structures, to try to determine when we're talking about what structures would need to be more resilient? If we look at something that's, built in the last, 10, 20 years and is on stilts, that would be a home that's less susceptible to climate change and might be able to kind of be broken out to kind of say, this is a better off neighborhood than, these cottages from the 1950s that are sitting on cinder blocks. Is that something do you know if that data can be manipulated in that way?
Absolutely. So age of structure, very easily. We need to work with you or your assessor to determine, how we could identify the characteristic of being up on stilts or new improvements such as that. But any data that's readily available in the assessor's records that we've already sort of interfaced with the mapping, such as age of structure, or we can look at all of the properties that are affected by floodplains, by flood mapping, and try and see if there's been any turnover or any new, any refinance or any sales since those updated building codes went into play and went into effect. Mm-hmm. That would be a decent proxy for, hey, these would probably have needed to have been updated to receive, a mortgage, et cetera. So let's talk about add to the GIS mapping using criteria such as age of structure, how could we put this, height, changes, e.g. stilts, and otherwise augment the structure analysis.
Talking about housing, Mary Lou asked if we could pivot to housing next. It'd be a good segue.
Let's do it. So, right, when we think about housing, it's not just market rate housing, it's also subsidized housing. You know, in Massachusetts, that's typically governed by the subsidized housing inventory programs like Chapter 40B and 40R. The town only has 2.5% of its year-round housing stock on the subsidized housing inventory. And as many of you know, the goal is to be at 10% in order to have more control over the 40B process. That's kind of where you stand in terms of subsidized housing. We also, in our housing-based analysis, have looked at housing cost burdens, and that's sort of measured by whether a household is spending more than 30% of its income on housing. And that there's a fair amount of the population, about a quarter of the population, particularly owners, who are experiencing housing cost burdens. So that's sort of the background to all of this, is what types of housing, and particularly affordable, not necessarily subsidized, but affordable, less than 30% of your income, are needed in Mattapoisett. And then Mary Lou, if you have any more general comments, please let us know. You can either speak, or we can unmute you, or you can type into the chat.
So maybe to get the conversation rolling a little bit, in the survey we asked what types of housing residents were looking for, and a little over half said they're still interested in seeing those single families on those larger lot sizes. And then 47% were interested in seeing, again, single families, but on smaller lots. And then there's an interest in seeing slightly smaller but attached townhouses, more dense style of housing there, but still maybe in line with what people would be interested in seeing for the town. And Cindy says whether these plans would consider 55 plus housing areas, and they definitely would if that's something you're interested in seeing. Obviously, we talked about Mattapoisett's aging population, so that's something that we definitely need to consider for the future. We want to allow people to age in place if that's something people are interested in seeing.
Is there sufficient?
When I met with the Mattapoisett Council on Aging about a year ago, there was a clear expression of, hey, I want to stay in town, but I'd like to downsize. There aren't so many opportunities to do so. How can we get those housing outcomes? How can we do that? Is that something you hear from yourself or from your neighbors or friends? Is that I heard it from the Council on Aging, but I'm curious if that's something you guys think about.
Definitely. I've got a few friends who are in big house, well, not so much big houses, but, are in their own homes, but they're in, getting up there in age, have been retired for 10, 15 years. And they're on waiting lists. They're saying like 2 to 3 years for some of the elderly housing coming available. And there's not much market. I mean, the house I'm in is fairly small, under 2,000 square feet of living space. And when I was building it, my builder said he had people pulling over and stopping him, working and saying, giving him offers. He's like, no, I'm not building this on spec. I'm building it, somebody owns it, I'm renovating it. There aren't many small, it's only a 2-bedroom home. There's not many small houses in town. There's a lot of bigger houses.
Yeah, and Mary Lou actually brings up a good point that we need to address zoning to enable the construction of these types of housing on smaller lots or denser housing. And there is a need to offer smaller units, both for seniors and younger families interested in either moving to Mattapoisett or growing up with their children in Mattapoisett.
I would certainly second that thought in there. I clearly hear the need for more different types of housing choices in town, particularly for people who want to downsize who are in town. And I think there's been an attitude shift about that over the last 10 or 15 years, that towns are more receptive to different types of housing, duplexes, townhouses, than maybe they were just a short time ago.
I mean, I will say our in regards to Mary Lou's comment, I mean, our zoning bylaw does allow cluster subdivisions, which would allow smaller lots and just have the offset common area. I mean, I don't. I'm going to come from this as a 30-something-year-old. You know, Grant, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if you know this number off the top of your head, but when you met with us last year regarding the housing stock, we were saying that an affordable price in town was somewhere around $250,000. The median houses are going for what, about $420,000?
Yeah, so there's an affordability gap.
My wife and I are both professionals and both work full time, and I mean, the house that we own is below that median sale price, and I mean that kind of makes, you know, we make that work, but it does take two professionals working full time in their 30s to be able to live in this town. And there have been times where, you know, we've had subdivisions of land and, you know, we're being told that it's going to be housing that's affordable for, you know, people who grow up in town and want to stay in town. But, you know, it's not. You have to have two professionals to live here. And, you know, I don't know what the answer is for making, say, single family homes affordable to, you know, people in our age bracket, but, you know, it takes two professionals to be able to afford in this town.
Yeah, so I mean, you hit the nail on the head. There's a big gap between you know, incomes and affordability in terms of housing prices, those median incomes. The answer, again, I just want to reassure you, we have these tools in our tool belt. We're sort of don't get there just yet, but yeah, the main tool is zoning, and is allowing more units to be built on less land, and different types of units to be built. You know, those land costs in Mattapoisett, in an attractive, charming seaside town, are embedded in every unit of housing. And that is the key driver of pricing. Or one of the key drivers, I should say. I don't want to overstate the point. But the key way to bring market rate housing at a more affordable price point is embedding more of those land costs over more units. And then we run into the question, and Nate, your observation about the cluster bylaw is great. We run into the idea of, okay, if we need more dense housing, how do we get that type of outcome that matches the way the community looks and feels and doesn't look like a big, you know, a housing complex in a big city that doesn't necessarily belong. And there are zoning tools, whether they're the cluster bylaw that Nate mentioned, or design guidelines, or design restrictions, design standards that the community can adopt and make sure sort of tailor those outcomes for more density and community aesthetics and community looks.
Cindy, following up on that, Grant, Cindy mentioned in the chat, she talked about her kids having a compound with the possibility of allowing accessory dwelling units on some lots. You know, again, another tool in the toolbox. She also notes this would necessitate town sewer because most septic systems are maxed out. You know, another part is what Grant was saying was, you know, when the builders buy these lots of land, you know, there's a certain size they have to be built to. The lot there's a minimum lot size. You know, usually they're quite large, you know, again, drives up the cost. You need to have septic on your lot. It can be done on smaller lots, but that's something to look at. You know, accessory dwelling units are another one, you know, or granny flats as some folks call them. Those are different ways to, you know, either your kids could move in or your parents could move in, you know, be on the same property as you know, separate housing unit. But those are different ways to accommodate affordable housing, not with the, you know, subsidized, but, you it's something that folks could use to stay in the town as they age.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, because I think I've looked into this, I think at least in the RR40 zone, they do allow ADUs. I think you would have to go before the ZBA, and I think the minimum lot size to do that needs to be in excess of 10,000 square feet more than what the underlying zoning district requires. So I think that is an option. I know at least in the RR40 zoning district. I can look into the other zoning districts as well to see if those ADUs are allowed there as well.
Yeah,
but
usually
that is something that we do have included in our bylaws already.
Yep. Special permits by the ZBA are common for ADUs.
Yeah.
There are also sometimes requirements that, if there's an accessory dwelling unit, that person be related by blood or marriage. I'm not sure if any of those exist in town. Those are the types of details that we'll have to get into when we get into the specialized housing workshop. But, this is producing more housing that is both affordable market rate housing and affordable subsidized housing is a multi-pronged attack. It requires multiple changes to multiple programs, multiple techniques to make a dent in it, because we're kind of dealing with the private real estate market, and we're just little community planners and community, and towns. So this is a big nut to crack. Are there any other, Lizeth, would you want to work us through the chat here?
Yeah, so Mary Lou just mentioned here that a 700 square foot family related attachment is allowed by zoning. And Cindy mentioned that she'd love to have an issue on our lot. We would have an issue on our lot that's about 2 acres because they're maxed out on their septic. So that's where I think that comment came from. So are there any other comments related to housing? I want to give us a chance to maybe talk about some of the other elements. What do you think about that, Grant?
Sure, yes.
Does anyone have a preference on maybe what we can move on to next? I know we have open space and rec, natural and cultural resources, or services and facilities.
Why don't we take a crack at open space and recreation? I know that's a big priority for town.
Yeah. So can anyone think of any critical areas for protection or conservation? What's their primary purpose? And have these changes evolved over time? Have you started using them differently?
I think
Your Mattapoisett River Aquifer.
That's what I was just going to say, has done a good job in protecting that aquifer. They have a unique financing mechanism to do that based on water withdrawals and sales. But it's a model in some ways of protecting the aquifer for public use for more than just Mattapoisett. I think Rochester, Marion, Fairhaven all participate in that. So I don't know if it's a priority and that they're doing it pretty well already, but it's a good model.
Yeah, for sure. It's a really significant portion of Mattapoisett. And I think people feel pretty strongly about its protection and conservation. So are there any other thoughts about undeveloped areas in town with existing or potential use for conservation or recreation interest as well?
Okay, for conservation, Mattapoisett Land Trust has been pretty aggressive in acquiring properties to keep things in conservation. And I had mentioned probably on the chat that one of the properties they want to access is the Santos farm, and that would have a secondary road that they could get people off of Angelica and Point Connet in an emergency. So that's all. I think it's all on their website. I don't know. They sent out the flyers hoping we'd send them lots of money.
Yes.
And Mary Lou mentioned here that Mattapoisett doesn't have a local wetlands bylaw.
What
Does
governs
anyone
that?
know? And that Concom governed by the Wetlands Protection Act. I noticed in the survey there was an interest in protecting the wetlands or identifying them more. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
Be a good thing.
Yeah, I think the town could definitely benefit from, I mean, a lot of the towns that I have projects in, you'll see like that the local bylaw includes like a 25-foot no build buffer zone from the resource areas. You'll even see some where they have a 25-foot no disturb and then like a 50-foot no build. And the applicant needs to submit evidence that, and I mean, it's more like the performance requirements of the Wetlands Protection Act, but you know, do some real thinking and provide real solutions to mitigate the potential impacts to the buffer zones.
Does Buzzards Bay Coalition fit in here anywhere?
Certainly.
Yeah, they've been, I'm on the board of the coalition. They've been very active in terms of buying up open space in the watershed. They own about 8,000 acres these days. So I don't know what particular, they work in concert with the land trust here in Mattapoisett.
Right.
I was just going to ask, the land trust does do a good job in conserving spaces. Sometimes I get concerned about like invasive plants, like in wetlands or, you know, just concerned about invasive plants, and also just want to mention like wildlife and animal safe spots for them.
Okay. Yeah, so that sort of overlap between open space and the natural and cultural resources, where we think about critical habitats and any sort of disturbance to those biomap 2 habitats or the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program habitats. Definitely make a note of that. If returning to sort of how master plans can change things, the 1999 master plan recommended that the zoning in the aquifer be changed to increase the minimum lot sizes, and that took place. That's a pretty impressive, you know, down zoning. In other words, allowing less density up there. That's frequently controversial in a community. So it can have impacts on property values and things like that. I'm wondering if the town has ever considered or discussed other techniques, such as transfer of development rights or things like that, that not only allow further conservation of land, but also can allow that density to be built where you need it more. So for example, if you're not familiar with a transfer of development right, basically it lets you, it's a legal mechanism, a voluntary exchange between property owners, where property owner in an area that would want to be conserved can sell the ability to build on his or her property to somebody where the town would want to build more, where there's already sewer service, where there's roadways, where there are amenities like those sidewalks and bike paths that you mentioned. And Mattapoisett seems like such a key, or such a good candidate for that kind of creative thinking. It occurred to me when I read your last your last bylaw, that you made some pretty aggressive changes to your zoning based on that type of concern. Has that ever come up in town, Nate, or have any of you other participants heard of that?
We haven't had anything come before us, at least in my 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. Any other sort of ideas about conserving land beyond just outright acquisition by the Mattapoisett Land Trust or Buzzard Bay Coalition or the town.
I have a question about the land conservation. That in and of itself, I would think would help water quality, but I'm not sure that it does. That, because in this area, that's one of my concerns is the water quality, because if you walk down Goodspeed Island, they have the placard out there, and I think the quality there is at like 30-something% out of 100. That's really poor. And here we are putting a bike path through there, which means more people, and you might infer that there will be more pollution from that. What do you know? I don't know that just buying land equates to having a healthy environment. You know, we have that land around, some of the land around there is conserved, but if the water is basically uninhabitable for plants and fish and other, you know, waterfowl and stuff, what good is that having the open land do if it's basically an open, smelly pit? So I think
and that even, I mean, I don't want to sound controversial here, but, you know, the biggest problems associated with water quality, I believe, in Mattapoisett has to do with nitrogen runoff and nitrogen in septic systems.
Definitely.
So, you know, look what Marion just went through and said that I believe their Board of Health is now requiring that any new or replacement systems in their town needs to have nitrogen removal equipment from within the septic system treatment train. And, you know, that's something that, I mean, Mattapoisett River Aquifer gets a lot of water from town. The harbor gets a lot of water from town. There are a lot of, you know, septic systems that are aging that, you know, it would be a major water quality benefit to start requiring these nitrogen removal systems in them. The problem is that they, you know, can add $5,000 to $10,000 in cost. But I think it would be, it's more, the water quality issues around here are more related to aging septic systems and applying fertilizer to lawns.
Yeah. Yep. It's got that phrase nitrogen loading, right? From typically, like you're saying, agriculture and stormwater runoff and primarily septic systems. So the more, you know, the more housing you can take off of septic and put onto, or those more, those granted costly nitrogen removal requirements, that's how you improve the water quality, particularly in, you know, down closer to the coast where all that.
Does anybody know what percentage we are private system versus sewerage in Mattapoisett? I know my mother worked very hard with a gentleman many years ago, back in the late 90s, to get some of the beach areas. And we got the Crescent Beach extension and the Park Street extension of the sewerage. But I know there's some
excellent question. And we've been working with Mary Crane to schedule a meeting with all of your town department heads. And one of the key things I'm hoping to figure out as this process is exactly that. What part of town is sewered, what part isn't, approximately what percentage is on septic, and hopefully get some of that data mapped and maybe even correlate it to the property records and add some value to your assessor's records. But right now, Mary, the answer is no, I don't know. But we hope to you know, add value to your data sets and to your property information as we move forward in this and gather that data. So that's another thing I flagged that. I'll flag this along with Nate's questions about flood, you know, flood improvements to properties.
Yeah, can we get Nick Nicholson on this sometime? He was the former director or whatever, I don't know what the title is for water and sewer.
Yeah, sure.
We'll send him an email. My husband will send him an email before Saturday. Yeah, we'll send him an email.
You don't have to rush. If he can't make it Saturday, there's plenty of opportunity. This is just the beginning of a, you know, 2 year.
Yeah, and I'm sure Henry would be able to answer the question as well. The current water and sewer superintendent.
Right. Okay, so we have about
I want to touch on something. Go ahead, Grant.
have about 10 minutes. Let's, yeah, go ahead.
So I wanted to touch on one of the last things that Mary had mentioned was this relationship with our open space and how we relate to it. Does anyone want to talk about that? And I think it relates a lot to also the natural and cultural resources, how we use our community space, our public spaces. Does anyone have thoughts on that? What you find valuable in Mattapoisett? So one of the ways that we wanted to discuss natural and cultural resource and get a better sense of how the community felt about it is maybe how would you describe Mattapoisett's culture to a visitor or a new resident if they asked you?
I
think
would say
Cindy's trying to respond.
She's getting
it certainly would have to
Muted.
be part of a regional context. That a lot of the cultural and natural amenities are not just in town, but those that are utilized by town residents go beyond town boundaries. So it's clearly part of a regional fabric.
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it. All the connections that we have in Mattapoisett and how they extend out to other neighboring towns. Are there any visual features? Mary Lou mentioned historic shipbuilding town. Does anyone agree with that or have any comments about that? I see a couple people shaking their heads. Yes, that's great.
That is how we started, and that I was thinking about it earlier when we were talking very early on in the conversation about people running businesses from their homes. Most of the homes in the village are converted from businesses. The village was not residential initially. You walk by the historic homes and it says this was the rope shop, this was the sail shop, this was the carpentry. It's all, they were all businesses initially with very, some of them were residential right from the get-go, but a lot of them weren't. So,
And to Cindy's point earlier, this question depends on who you talk to, right? And so somebody's idea of culture and of living in town is not necessarily the same as your next door neighbors. So that's fine. We're trying to get that broad swath of input and various perspectives. So this is good. This is all good.
This might is again keep feeling like everything I say is real. It's obviously my perspective on things, but as somebody who doesn't have children and somebody who up until pandemic was working, a half-hour commute away, I find it difficult to find out what is available in town, even though I've lived here summers all my life and full-time for about 15, 20 years now. A lot of the amenities, somebody mentioned something to me the other day. I said, where's that? And it's a public beach that I didn't even know existed, because so many of our beaches are private, which is unique to Massachusetts pretty much. But there are things that I think we do need to, maybe that committee that you spoke of earlier might be something that would be good for us to have, something that takes in all the broader, the things that aren't really stuff that town hall should be having to deal with, the more day-to-day living and amenities for the town, and to get the word out there of what is available and how we can be of service to each other and make it more of a community as opposed to the neighborhood, and just the interaction between houses that are in near proximity to each other.
Great. Great.
And when we talk about community, I know we're coming up on our last few minutes here. Can you think of any community building, either events or moments that you've experienced personally in Mattapoisett?
And the big annual event is Harbor Days.
Harbor Days, yeah.
Which is basically a weekend of, kind of a crafts and whatnot at the Shipyard Park down by the town wharf.
It actually goes all week because the Women's Club does the Taste of the Town,
Oh, yeah.
sale, there are concerts, and of course with COVID, none of it could be done. So the Women's Club went virtual with thanking all the restaurants this year, 1 a week for 11 weeks. And Lions has done a few fundraising types of things online, not much yet, still working that one out. But yeah, that's a really huge one. That's not only huge for just the people who live in town, people come from the whole area, and a lot of people who vacation here plan their vacations specifically around that event.
Yeah, great.
I also think it would be nice if we could have more cultural events. I think of Marion, which has a theater and it has a music hall. They can have weekly concerts in the summer and professional kind of shows of actors. We don't have a cultural center that I know of. We don't have a building. We don't have a place for those events to happen.
If Marion has it and New Bedford has it, do we really need it?
But it would create a sense more of a community, I think. Sometimes I don't even know if I go to Marion because I don't know if it's, if I'm welcome, I guess.
These are all really great comments. I know that the survey actually reiterated your comment about enhancing arts and culture, and more than half of the respondents said that. I know we're coming up on the last couple minutes of our time. Do you have any closing comments, Grant, or do you think you want to cover any other last minute items?
I just want to say thank you. This is exactly why we were here tonight, is to try and get these little insights and begin the process of understanding your goals as a community. I hope that everybody here will, return to these events that we have as we move forward, and will contact us through all the other means we talked about during the general presentation. We need local champions such as yourselves to be behind this project and to make sure that it truly reflects your goals. And, when this plan is all done, it's going to be handed over to you. It's going to be a recipe that ideally has all of the strategies needed to meet your goals. But to the best of my knowledge, nobody from the SERPED staff here lives in town, and we're going to go home to our towns. So we need those local champions such as yourselves to have this plan and believe in this plan, and circulate it with all of your colleagues and neighbors, and make sure that it creates its own momentum and excitement and optimism. That's the key. So it's just gratifying to hear all of your thoughts and your optimism and your ideas. And I just ask that you don't go away. This is an 18 to 24 month process, and we need you during it and then when it's over.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out, for sticking with us.
If you know of anybody else that we could contact, a group or some folks, just let us know. Let any one of us know, and we can try to reach out to that group or that Facebook group or those people. So,
thank you very much.
I passed it to Lions and I passed it to Women's Club, so maybe you'll get some of those too.
Council on Aging, community groups, your neighborhood groups, anybody you can think of. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye. Have a good night.
So the next person I see is Michael Larenko.
Yep. Hi, I'm Michael Larenko. I'm the town administrator for the new town administrator I took over about 6 months ago. I lived in Mattapoisett. Well, I grew up in Mattapoisett, and I lived here for about 20-something years until I went to college. I graduated from OR, the local school, went to college, worked in Boston for a little bit, worked in Cape Cod for about 3 years as the assistant administrator, and now, I'm back in Mattapoisett as the town administrator. I don't, as of right now, live in town, but my parents still reside here. They've been here for over 25 years. So, I have roots in town, and now I'm hoping to be the town administrator for a long time and get, as Kate said, continue with helping the town be the best it's been since I grew up here. So that's what I'm here for.
Great. Thank you. Okay, next I see Janice Robbins.
Hi, I'm Janice Robbins. I'm currently a member of the planning board. I have been a resident in Mattapoisett since the late 70s, longtime resident. I am retired. I was practicing law at a sort of a medium-sized law firm north of here for a long, long time, a lot of real estate development, commercial work. I'm very much interested in getting a new updated master plan for the town. As a member of the planning board, we certainly see all kinds of projects, and people come before us with things that they would like to do in town, and it makes some sense to us to have a cohesive plan going forward.
Great, thank you. Okay, next I see Shirley Haley. This is good. We all get our practice on muting and unmuting too. This is good. Almost.
There, the key combination worked. I came to town about the same time Janice did. And I am here representing the board of the Council on Aging. And we, of course, are interested in matters that relate to aging in place and letting seniors live here and not have to move out of town because they have no alternatives.
Great. Thank you. Next is Mary Crane.
Hi, I'm Mary Crane. I have lived in town since 2009, so relative newcomer. And I have worked for the town's planning board for about 4 years. And before that, I sat on the planning board of town for about 4 years prior to that. And I'm here to do whatever I can to assist the master plan committee and the town to help explore and realize its goals and help make the master plan process a reality. So I'm at everyone's service, whatever I can do to help, to listen, to be a part of this, I'm glad to do so.
Great, thank you. I see Bonnie D'Souza is next. Hi, Bonnie.
I don't know, can you guys see me? Because I can't see me. All right, because I'm on the computer. Usually I show up, oh well. I am a resident in Mattapoisett since 2002. My background is in architecture and design and a little bit of planning. I really believe in towns that are responsive to their people, the residents who live there, as well as in Mattapoisett, the substantial number of non-residents who pay taxes. So I think people should be responsive to taxpayers as well. I got more involved in understanding how the town works because I'm an advocate for the bike path. For a long time, I was an advocate, but not involved in town issues because there's a Friends of the Bike Path private nonprofit, and then there is the Bike Path Committee. But more and more I saw how things get done in town, and I made it my business to know people in town hall to try to figure out the best avenues to get things done. So my interest in a master plan and in updating the master plan is to make sure that we take care of business in a fair and transparent way, and that residents and town hall work as a team to actually, as Kate said, this is a wonderful place it is to live. So.
Great, thank you. Next, I see David Montero.
Hey guys, Dave Montero here. Well, I think I'm probably the newest person. I just moved in this year to Mattapoisett. I purchased a house here last year. It took about a year of renovation, so I've gone through almost every department within the town hall over the last year, and met a lot of people and going through the process. My wife also has a business here in town as well, but prior to moving here, I just moved from Raynham. I was in that area for almost 25 years or so, and really got to see an opportunity of a town that was totally underutilized and not run as a business, and not taking advantage of the opportunity of the location and the schools and everything. Really look forward to working with the town and seeing what kind of advantages and stuff from an economic development standpoint that makes this town so attractive. And again, my kids are a little older, so I have time on my hands to get involved with the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next I have Peter Quant. Hopefully I got that right. Peter, can you hear us? You're on mute.
Yeah, I can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay. I am a summer resident. I am one of those, excuse me, taxpayers but not voters that Bonnie D'Souza cited. I am interested in what the master plan process is all about, because I was alarmed when I saw what the bike path had become, when I pictured a 4-foot wide strip of asphalt, and now I see essentially the Southeast Expressway down at Shining Tides. Also, the imposition of the fire station on what was a nice bucolic piece of land next to the police station, when it really could have been put anywhere. Valuable land that the town could have maybe done something better with. So I'm here more as an observer, since I can't vote. And I pass the baton to the next person.
Very good. Thank you, Peter. The next person I have is Cecile. Cecile, can you hear us? You're on mute. Okay, well, we'll move on. Last person is Kevin Spratt. Cecile, if you figure out the unmute, just simply unmute yourself and speak freely. But in the meantime, Kevin, you're last, and then we can move on.
So I've been a resident of Mattapoisett for about 17 years, interested in the process of what the master plan development would be, and both the historic master plan and surrounding towns, what they have for a plan, and that's probably about it.
Great. So last thing I'd like to do is just introduce or give Taylor and Jackie just a moment to introduce themselves, talk a little bit about, you know, their role in this evening. So Jackie, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Jackie Jones. I'm a transportation planner at Serped. My role really is to listen and kind of help guide conversations. I've had a lot of experience with planning in the town, specifically related to the bike path. So I'm very interested to what people have to say about that. And I've known Bonnie a long time, so glad to see her here.
And Taylor.
Hi everyone, I'm Taylor Perez. I'm a comprehensive planner at Serped, and I'm a co-lead on this master plan. So this is my first master plan, having joined Serped in January. So I'm kind of also just here to listen, to observe, and to get to know everyone.
So as Jackie, thanks Taylor, as Jackie mentioned, she and I will sort of co-MC this breakout group. And so what we're going to do is basically go through each one of the chapters of the master plan. So tonight we'll be talking about 8 specific topics. Taylor's going to share her screen, and she's basically going to be taking notes. So traditionally what we would do is, you know, in a group setting, we would all sit around in sort of a semicircle, and we would write on large Post-it notes. So essentially this will be our large Post-it note, and we'll have our conversation and take notes about certain things. So we're just going to quickly summarize the topics that we're going to be talking about tonight. So land use, as you can see on the screen, we're going to be talking about areas in town that we'd like to see, you know, growth, or perhaps preservation tactics. And then, you know, further down is economic development. Again, just talking about businesses in town, where they are, the types of businesses that you have, maybe some new ones that you'd like to see the town, you know, invest in. Housing speaks for itself, types of housing you have in town. What are some of the things that you'd like to see the town go after in the future? Climate and resilience planning, all about climate change, and be it the coastal community that you are, it's an important topic. And then open space and recreation. I will note that climate and resilience planning isn't technically a chapter that's included in the Mass General Law, but it is an add-on for a lot of communities lately. Open space and recreation is one of those required chapters, as is natural and cultural resources. Again, just natural spaces in town and the cultural events that the community either has now or would like to see in the future. Transportation and circulation, that sort of speaks for itself. And then services and facilities. So again, places like fire station, police station, town hall, etc. Those types of things. So what we traditionally do here is, you know, we could start at the beginning, but we like to open it up to the group and say, where would you like to start? You know, if there's a pressing issue that you want to get to, let's talk about it. So I will open it up in that way. If anyone has anything in particular that they want to get off their chest right away, feel free to either click the raise hand feature down at the bottom of your screen. Unfortunately, I don't see that on my screen, so if you don't either, you can just sort of wave your hand like this. Jackie and Taylor will help me out scrolling through the individual icons or the windows to make sure that we're not missing anybody. Or simply just unmute yourself and you can just start talking. We'll find you. So it's a casual conversation. So with that, if anyone has anything they'd like to start us off with, by all means, raise your hand and let us know that you'd like to say something.
I just have a question, Jed. This
Sure.
is Bonnie. Do we have any graphics, or are we just working off of the words on the screen?
You can. So we do have graphics. We have the ability to show you the project webpage as well as the interactive maps. So maybe we can go through those first. So this is information that's on your project webpage. So you have the option of downloading PDF maps or simply scrolling through this interactive map. So the first dot, actually, Taylor, can you go back up one? is your existing zoning. And maybe Taylor can sort of guide us through the interactive map. Do you mind doing that, Taylor?
Yeah, that's fine. So you want me to just like walk through each one so far?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So we have the existing zoning here. I feel like this kind of speaks for itself. Large swaths of residential. You have your commercial along Route 6, things like that. Your aquifer protection district. I think it actually might be a bit more specific. I'm not sure if it's displaying correctly here, but we can zoom in on that so you can see it up close. Land use. This is pretty much just kind of a guide, a little bit more detailed zoom in of everything that we have here in town. There's like, this would be kind of in depth to go through, but we can definitely reference this throughout. I feel like that will be useful. Housing map, this is kind of just a zoom in from the land use map. A little hard to see, but largely single family residential throughout Mattapoisett. These are your community priority areas. I think this was written 2013, correct me if I'm wrong, Jed. So you see here priority development areas along Route 6, your industrial park, and then priority protection areas largely in the Aquifer district. So this is the Roadway Network, just kind of organized by functional class. These circles represent crashes, number of crashes I believe that occurred within a 2-year period from 2017 to 2019. So just this intersection right here is a major kind of breakpoint to kind of keep in mind. Your bike ped and transit map, which I'm sure most folks are familiar with, the rail trail, this unconnected thing here, I believe, and sidewalk network right down Route 6, and the bus route. Your open space and recreation map. This, I will preface, is a state kind of created thing. So there sometimes we'll run into issues where there might be something that actually is protected open space that might not be represented at the state level, but is protected. So if you run into that when we have this conversation, we can figure that out. There is also a zoom in for Chapter 61 land, which is here in orange. So we can reference that if necessary. This is your habitats map. You have your vernal pools, the biomap 2 core habitats and critical natural landscapes, and the priority habitats for rare species represented in this purple overlay. And then last but not least, your water resources. So these are ensuring wellhead protection areas highlighted in pink and MassDEP recognized aquifers. So that's pretty much the whole map. I'll give it back to you, Jed. We can kind of, again, we can get into the nitty-gritty as we see fit.
Sure. Perhaps the land use might be one to just stay on for just a quick second. So this is all the land uses found within your assessor's information because they code each parcel in order to basically assess the property owner taxes. And so what you can see here is that, you know, from our perspective, we see a lot of institutional land, which is typically those entities that do not pay taxes. So it would be town-owned land, it would be state-owned land, it would be charitable or religious type institutions that own property that do not pay those taxes. And then the other thing that we see here is a lot of open space. So you see the green on the map. So there's quite a bit of green, there's quite a bit of blue. And then the next biggest thing here is yellow. So those are traditional of, you know, I don't know if you're using the term rural or semi-rural for Mattapoisett, but traditionally that type of ownership is something that you would see a lot of in a town like that. What we don't see a lot of is reds and purples. So that's your commercial is red and your purple is industrial. So your tax base is really affected or is made up primarily of all of those yellows. So it's residential uses that pay a lot of the taxes in town. So that might be a place to start in terms of development in town. Is that something that the town or you folks are happy with? Or would you like to see that stay the way it is, or would you like to see that change? In particular, the question is related to, say, your tax base. Would you like to see more economic development in town to sort of share the load in that tax base?
I have one more question, Jed. This is Bonnie. There was a certain amount of gray. Can you and the the format hides the legend. So what's the gray?
Usually there's two grays. What you can see here is a darker gray, which is the utility and transportation. Then there are other grays which are vacant. They're assessed as vacant properties. Sometimes, yeah, and sometimes you'll see white, which almost looks like the gray. That just, as you can see on the legend there, it just indicates that the assessor doesn't have any data for that particular parcel. So I will just mention again that, in your spare time and during this 14-day period that this workshop page is open, as well as the master plan page for the duration of the project, you can go in here and you can explore on your own. Just like Taylor was, you can click right on those parcels and get information about each one of those parcels. And she's going to show you where it lives. Easy to use. So how about we return to that question? In terms of land use, let's maybe start with the whole idea of, do you feel that the current growth patterns or development patterns in town are appropriate?
Okay, it's Bonnie again. Obviously, I'm not afraid to speak. So, and I hope to just get the conversation rolling. I simply want to say that the Industrial Drive area is a prime area that I believe should be developed. It's close to the highway interchange, which means that more commercial development there will not interfere too heavily with the other roads in town, Route 6 and North Street in particular. So I would love to see more development there. Okay, done.
How about anyone else? Where in town would you like to see perhaps more development, to add to what Bonnie was just saying? Sure.
This is Janice Robbins. I guess I kind of go in a circle in terms of, the chicken and the egg. Our housing doesn't really attract enough people so that they would support businesses in town. So it's, do you put the, do you focus on development of industrial or commercial areas and hope that that will stimulate the need for more diverse housing in Mattapoisett, or do you make the town more attractive for a more diverse population, and then that will result in more economic development in town? So it's maybe a little bit of both, but in all the years that I've lived here, our population really hasn't grown very much. It grew a little bit at one point and then it shrunk a little. We really have been stuck at just over 6,000 year-round residents.
And is that a negative, staying the same, or?
Well, if you're looking for development, aren't you looking to grow? Isn't that?
I would say you're looking for development to grow the commercial area, which would increase the tax base, but I don't know if the population needs to necessarily increase.
How would the commercial areas be supported if there aren't people around to support it?
They don't only have to come from Mattapoisett. Right?
Oh,
so
sure.
we could get the benefit of the taxation off of commercial property without the additional headcount into residents or into the school system.
So Kevin, would you say that, are you in favor of sort of keeping the town the way it looks now?
I think so. I mean, I think the town will be probably the same permanent population, or the year-round population. And we're probably going to lose housing to seasonal population. That's probably where the growth will go. The growth probably will also go in conversion of smaller summer homes into something larger, which is good and bad. So that'll change the look of the town. And I'm not a proponent of that. I'm just stating what I think might be a fact. And then the other concern I have is commercial increase on Route 6 is probably something I'm not in favor of. It is somewhat of a rural look and feel. Marion had some challenges in keeping that for a period of time. I hope that we could be more successful at that. I don't mind improvement in the look of it, but I certainly don't want 3 pharmacies and McDonald's showing up in the next 5 to 10 years.
So would it, just to summarize your thought, would that be, you wouldn't necessarily be opposed to commercial development on Route 6, provided that it's not, or provided that it's, it matches the look and feel of the current businesses? Would that be accurate?
I would agree with that, but unfortunately we don't have any restrictions for both signage and look and feel. So that's somewhat of a losing battle, because what will happen is everyone will essentially show up, push the boundary, and then as an afterthought we'll realize, well, we didn't do signage restrictions or look and feel restrictions to keep it quaint.
I see.
I think I completely agree with Bonnie where the footprint of the industrial park, I don't know how much it could grow in the sense side roads or some other development there, but that is certainly an underutilized piece of property. And it's actually somewhat not up to par from a look and feel standpoint at this time.
Definitely an area where you'd want to concentrate future development.
Absolutely.
Non-residential, we'll call it.
Yeah, non-residential commercial, a tax base that'll support the town without the negative impact. I think the negative impact will be the access to the industrial park. That road, which I believe money has been set aside by a grant to improve, but that will have some negative impact. But I do think there's a lot of property there that could actually be a high tax base commercial property.
And what do you see those negative impacts being of developing out the industrial drive area? Do you think it will add traffic?
So unfortunately, I think there are a lot of wetlands. I don't know if it's flagged that way, but I think there's some challenges in expanding the road, and also that what I'd call a snake pattern or whatever, that aggressive curve at the ending or the beginning of the industrial park doesn't really lend itself to really expanding that. So I think expanding the driveway, I apologize. But in general, the footprint of all the space there certainly lends itself to be expanded.
What about Route 6 in general? So you talked about sort of the quaint character of that, and anyone else, please feel free to chime on this, but it is a 4-lane roadway. So it has 2 travel lanes in each direction, which sort of has more of a commercial feel to it.
It does, but having attended the SERPED meeting in Marion to talk about the longer stated plan, I fundamentally don't know if that'll actually change within my lifetime, because it does take a lot to both change the road and either land taking or changes. I wouldn't consider it a full 4-lane road in both directions. I consider it something less than that. I certainly am not an advocate of it being a full 4-lane road in both directions from Fairhaven to Wareham. I think that what we have in Mattapoisett with an exclusive turn lane in the middle works.
I see Shirley Haley with her hand up. Did you want to comment?
Yes, I just wanted to say that recalling the vitriol from the meetings when the Bay Club was being proposed in town, there were people insisting that we would have motels up and down Route 6 because they'd have golf tournaments. and that would lead to fast food. Recall that the drive-through for the Dunkin', oh, I almost said Dunkin' Donuts, the Dunkin' store at the 7-Eleven was a huge breakthrough. So the town itself, by nature, does not want to advance in highly visible commercialization.
I'd agree that the sentiment is that they don't want to. I would agree that the sentiment is they don't want to, but there's nothing in place to prevent it.
No, there's not.
I do think there are some restrictions on drive-throughs in town. I don't remember correctly.
There must be, because
I don't have a full history, although I did attend the Serpent sponsored hearings or workshops on priority development areas. And at that time, there was a member of the planning board who was advocating a change in zoning to increase the business zone to something like 400 feet deep from Route 6. And that was particularly in order to make it easier for modern style businesses to invest in properties on Route 6. A lot of that would actually double the depth of lot size. Jed, I don't know if you recall this. I think Grant ran the study. So there are certain restrictions that are in place because it's hard property to develop. And you probably at this point have to gather a group of properties to do anything that's really, that is typical of the modern strip mall kind of thing. I'm not an expert in it by any means, but I know that very few, I know that our current zoning doesn't facilitate a big box store kind of development. I also wanted to address what Kevin said about properties tending towards moving towards seasonal occupation. I do recall one of the current selectmen noticing with a little, I don't know, dismay, how dark the village has become in the winter. That the year-round residents in the village are no longer anywhere near the numbers that they used to be. And so I have to concur with what Kevin was saying as the pattern, because the times are what the times are.
Great. Kate, we see your hand up.
Yeah. Am I still muted or not muted?
You're good.
I'm good. All right. Well, I think what I'm seeing is that we're throwing out these thoughts. And the first question seemed to be more important to me because so I went back and I don't have enough screens. I'm going to need to get a really good setup at some point where I've got several screens so I can do this or have pieces of paper. But I'm looking at the illustration that shows the priority development areas in purple and the priority protection areas in green. And obviously the green is much larger than the purple. Yes, so there you go. Thank you for bringing that up. But it seems to me that the first question where we're looking at, do we still think these are the actual priority areas, is probably a good place to start, because it then kind of focuses in on the patterns of growth and development in the town that will derive from these priority areas. And so it probably makes sense if, as a committee, we kind of revisit these things and then look in general at what kinds of businesses could fit themselves into these areas. And I agree, the whole idea of the big box stores and things like that wouldn't be a compatible kind of development anyway. But, you know, obviously the industrial area that's already set up is a great thing to propose. I think what we're going to have to really focus on in terms of these two ideas is, where do the people fit? And we're really starting to get to that now with the idea of, you know, maybe a dwindling year-round base, and the fact that we probably need housing that accommodates people in different kinds of family units. You know what I mean? Like, not just the ordinary Mark 1, Mod 1 nuclear family, but people who live with other people, people who need, you know, more affordable kinds of things. Because I think we've done a really good job of physically identifying the areas that can be developed and should be protected, but that now we have to think about who we are as people who already live here, and going forward, what kind of development or growth will attract new people, many of whom will still be like the people who already live here, and many of whom may be very different, you know, if they're related to the businesses or they have families and younger children and that sort of thing. And I probably wouldn't be a big fan of an increase in summer residents for that reason, because I feel like, I mean, I have no objection to people having summer homes here, but it's not the same kind of community. So those are just my thoughts based on the you know, literally the first two questions. This is kind of difficult in this virtual way, because when you normally have meetings, I like to have lots of pieces of paper and other screens and things where I can kind of quickly reorient myself to the already existing work. And I think those of us who are not already on the planning board, or who haven't spent a lot of time in the process, it's going to take us a little while to get up to speed. So I guess I'm asking, bear with me if I'm sounding redundant. Thank you.
I'm just going to jump in. Definitely, if you have suggestions or ways that you feel that we could be better providing folks who aren't on the planning board, who are just wanting to get involved in the process now with more information, we would love to hear it. So you can definitely email one of us after, we'll have the conversation for sure.
Sure, thanks.
Thank you, Kate. I see Cecile has had her hand up for a little while.
Yes, can you hear me?
You can, yeah.
Oh, I'm finally here. I've been here all along, but I'm not used to Zoom. This is my first one, and at least I'm here. But I've been listening to all of your comments anyway. And I just want to bring out, too, the reason why I was here. I've been in town since 1984. And as I'm listening to all what we could do with the land that we have, we definitely have to think of affordable housing and also senior housing. Because what is going to be happening is, I just went through that, where I sold my house to my son, and then I had no place to go. I'm lucky I am still in town. So I think that's an issue that when we're looking at land, we should kind of consider also, not only for industry, but also for housing, as someone just mentioned, Kate, and I agree with you. I think we have a lot of issues to look at, but we're just beginning the process.
Thank you.
Cecile. I see Shirley's hand up too.
I wanted to agree with Kate and Cecile. I think we we don't need to worry about attracting more people to move here. Mattapoisett is very attractive in many ways across the board. And I think that the summer population in the area where I live, I'm finding that a lot of people who have been summering here with their children are now replacing the summer cottages with year-round homes in their retirement. And so they're coming to town, they're paying taxes, they're not having children in the schools. That's a big bonus. So I don't really think, I mean, I'm sure more summer people will keep coming, but I think that the fact that that is some sort of trend that I'm seeing, at least in my neighborhood, is some sort of reassurance that the population is becoming more year-round. And the other thing is, I think that we need to concentrate more on making sure the town stays livable for the people who already live here than to be worrying about how to attract more people and increase our tax base and so on. Cecile's points about the affordable housing and senior housing are very, very germane. The population of Mattapoisett is mostly seniors at this point. I mean, it's 60 some odd %. So we really have to think in terms of where everyone's going to live and how we're going to manage it. The living arrangement where people live together is a real possibility that we have discussed at the COA board. So these things I think are more important for us to deal with than attracting more people to build more houses to get more tax.
This is Bonnie. I have a question about the historic master plan and what level of importance was assigned to senior and affordable housing. Can anybody answer that?
I guess it's a tricky question in terms of level of importance. I mean, traditionally what we do is when we get to these element-specific workshops, so the next set of workshops is when we dive deep into what the previous master plan said, and then we answer questions related to, okay, did you achieve these goals or strategies? And if you didn't, why not? What were the obstacles? And are they still something that you want to pursue? And if you do, how can you do it in a way that will get it achieved? And so I guess perhaps that's the answer to your question, but in terms of a master plan, everything's important. Hopefully I answered.
Yep, we'll get to it in the next workshop. That's a good answer. Thanks.
So I just want to take a moment, just because I'm sure people are hearing some of the feedback. What we're going to do is, if you have your mic on, and I'm going to do it myself, but whenever I'm not talking, I'm just going to mute folks so that we don't run into that feedback situation. But we did want to sort of stay on the housing topic because it sounds like it's an important thing. David, I'm not sure if you had raised your hand at one point. Okay.
Hi there. Yes, I think a lot of these are great ideas, but I think where it all begins is in the infrastructure. I've been fighting with this as I just took on this house, living in a house with a 40-year-old septic system. And if you don't have the infrastructure in place, you're not going to be able to get commercial buildings. You're not going to be able to get senior housing. You're not going to be able to get any of those if you don't have the infrastructure in place, if you don't have the strong negotiated contracts with electrical companies. You're not going to get those things. And from an outsider just coming in, just to let you know, I just came from Raynham, which is about 30 miles away. Everyone up there knows what Turk's is. People know what all the restaurants are in downtown New Bedford. They've all been there. They will drive. They will come, whatever it is. I think all of us have probably been to Mashpee Commons, and there wasn't one big box store there. So we've been to those places. So you don't need to have the big box stores. You do need commercial. It is the lifeblood of any community, is having that commercial and supporting those businesses, whether it's big or small.
So just in response to David, the Industrial Drive project, the road project that was discussed previously by Kevin, that does involve, well, we are trying to involve that with installation of sewer in that area. And you are correct, you know, a big housing complex or even a small housing complex, you know, that would require some sort of connection with sewer. I would tell you the qualms currently and what you know, I think about, and I think what the planning board thinks about is the effect of infrastructure has on the tax rate and how quickly that infrastructure grows on the tax base we're currently here. That's conflicting with the fact that, you know, we have individuals talking about keeping it livable to the people in Mattapoisett. You know, it's a control function of keeping the tax rate livable for those residents as well as building on infrastructure. But I will tell you, current projects and moving forward, when we redo roads or when we improve at least the base infrastructure, we're trying to look to expand sewer and the needs necessary to do those you know, commercial expansions as well as the housing expansions. The one thing I will say, you know, being here, you know, as a child and growing up, my family could afford a house in Mattapoisett. I would tell you right now that's likely impossible. You know, and I think for me or any young person with our age, it's getting harder and harder, and it's not due to the tax rate in town, but the valuation of homes. So when we talk about attracting individuals to town, I don't think that's a problem. I think everybody knows by looking at home sales, people are willing to spend well over asking prices in some areas for homes. So, you know, a home in the village, I would tell you, is probably not achievable without spending, you know, $600,000. So I would say Mattapoisett's already attractive enough. I don't think that's a fear, at least for me, that I see as a town administrator and, you know, who lived here for quite a long time. I think, you know, keeping valuations and finding some affordable ways of keeping people here and finding, like you're saying, a mixed housing that can kind of attract people here in an affordable way might be more desirable.
Safe to say a variety of housing as well?
Yeah, I think we need to look at what type of housing the towns want. There's you know, there's 40B. There's a lot of mixed use. You know, some areas, especially in Cape Cod, we talked a lot about mixed use facilities. You know, with a business in the bottom and an apartment above the top. You know, and when we talk about a summer population, nobody is more affected than our Cape Cod community, and I would tell you the effects of that is largely due to valuation of homes. The individuals there on Cape Cod, the jobs don't support the valuation of homes, so the individuals that can afford those homes, they don't live on Cape Cod. They work and live outside of that area. So, you know, it's a twofold problem where, you know, if the valuations of a home continue to grow and those homes can only be afforded from people outside of the community, that's why you get a bigger summer population. So, you know, in order to get housing that you desire in a small span of land, you got to kind of think outside the box and make sure you get the right housing that the town desires and not big complexes, you know, that don't match the character of the town. So I agree. I think affordable housing is necessary. I just think it should be the proper affordable housing for the community.
I saw that Janice had her hand up, and then after Janice, I think Mary, you had your hand up.
I wanted to add a comment and some thoughts on the desirability factor for Mattapoisett. If you look at some of the information on the webpage regarding the population, we are very much skewered with an older population, and younger people are not staying. They go to school here, they grow up here like Michael, and then they leave and they don't come back like Michael has come back. My two kids, one culturally did not like this area, wanted more exciting things, and the other one for employment. They're, you know, for the professional white collar people, there's limited employment. So one of the things that's happening to our population, it's getting older, and the millennials are just not staying in big numbers. And, you know, that maybe is something that one town can't really solve. I mean, we need more and different types of employment in this area, and more things to attract young people. I think a diverse age population is a good thing for a town. It makes it more vibrant, and it's to be welcomed. You know, I don't really want to live in a town that's all retired people, which is where I'm at. But I think diversity in the age group is a good thing to look for. I don't know how we fix that though.
Mary?
I just wanted to circle back for a moment to the affordable housing. And one of the areas I've been thinking about, and I think I'm not alone in this, is that our zoning as it stands now doesn't have a whole lot of teeth when it comes to affordable housing or requiring it in any real form. It's in the cluster development and the special residential development sections of the bylaw, but it's more like a suggestion. If you want to do it, it doesn't really have any teeth to require any production of units. So I would pose that for the community to consider. Do we want to make our zoning bylaws a little bit more requiring of inclusionary affordable housing units? Sometimes communities don't want it. I don't know, but that's something I'd like to throw out there as something for everyone to consider. One thing that happened fairly recently, it was a land developer came into the office and asked, well, what does the town want? What do you think the town might want to see? And I threw out a few suggestions, and then he actually came before the planning board and had the same conversation. And we did touch a little bit on what the needs are in town. Is it for 55 plus? Is it for affordable, a mix of affordable? Is it for just generally modest sized and modest priced housing that would allow our young people and young families to either return to town or stay in town if they so desire? So I think that's an important conversation for everyone to have. So I'd just like to throw that into the mix as well.
Can I jump in quick? Is that okay? I guess just to kind of continue the affordable housing conversation, right now I know Mattapoisett is under the 10% state mandate. So there is the odds that you could have a 40B come in, whether friendly or not. So I guess to say that there was someone who was coming in and willing to work with the town is good. It would be great to kind of continue the conversation here so that we could possibly present an alternative to say, hey, this is the type of housing that folks are interested in, so that we could help coordinate with you to develop the affordable housing so you could work towards that 10% standard in a way that you feel is appropriate for the town. So if we could, I guess, continue to have that conversation and kind of get into the question of how can you encourage housing that you think works with Mattapoisett's natural features that you could also potentially pose for a 40B or something like that. I think that could be really useful to talk about.
But a 40B really only works if there's a large area available for concentrated growth or development. We don't really have a lot of that. Or if we did, it's a lot of wooded area that would be converted to that. So in one way, I look at it as the state mandate is probably the encouragement that many people would have to develop that. Do we need to do additional work to encourage that? We probably do, but I've seen instances where 40Bs are developed based on frustration in developing other property, and the developer will essentially flip to a 40B in order to get the maximum concentration of units and profit.
Do you have a sense, just to stay on this topic, and we're going to try to move on fairly quickly after this because it's now almost 8:15. We want to get you in and out of here by 9 o'clock. I'd like to go to bed at 9 as well. But do you have a sense for the last time the town handled the 40B and how that went? Or has it ever? See a lot of shaking heads.
Yeah, there hasn't been much. As you said, we're under the 10%. There isn't any big 40B real big complexes in the recent history. I know there is discussion of one off Crystal Spring Road currently in the works, or at least being discussed, but there hasn't been one in the recent history. At least unless Mary knows of something that I don't know, but I don't believe so.
No, there haven't been any, and the discussions with this particular developer are just that, discussions, nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing formal or anything.
Are those large scale projects or smaller scale where it might be 4 to 8 condominiums or something like that? Or are these larger scale where it's housing, new construction, single families?
It can certainly vary. It can definitely vary. But traditionally, the 40Bs are maximize the amount of units wherever possible. Janice, I see you.
Yeah, I was going to say that what we have, the only equivalent we have is the Housing Authority complex that's north of Route 6, which houses, I don't know how many units in apartment style. And they also own several single family homes, but that's the extent that I know of any real affordable housing projects.
Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, as most of you probably know, a lot of communities are concerned about 40B because they continually get applications. But if you're not receiving those applications, you may, just be in that situation where you're just as not obviously as concerned as perhaps places like Rainham. Rainham, has sewer throughout the entire community, so it's certainly something that would attract that type of development for certain. But I'm going to pass it over to Jackie because I promised we're going to move on. It's 8:15. So
yeah, so let's move on to open space and recreation. So what is everyone's sense on that? Do you feel like there's a large amount of undeveloped space in town that's being utilized by people? I know that the Mattapoisett Land Trust has several properties that have protected land. There's also the bike path. Does anybody want to share their experiences with that? More along the lines of, do you think you have enough or do you want more?
My view is what we have is great. More is always better, as both a quality of life aspect and a way to prevent unneeded development or poor development. So I don't know, would this master plan be encouraging the land trust to acquire more land for that benefit, or is this outside of that?
It more guides the process in general. It's not specific to any one entity, but it does factor into the conversation how much land is already conserved. We could also, the questions kind of fall along the lines of, are those properties accessible to everyone who wants to use them? Does anybody see any challenges there?
This is Bonnie. I'd like to note, so I participated in the most recent update of the open space and recreation plan. We set a few goals, and that plan has not yet been updated to reflect some significant acquisitions by the land trust and by the town, notably the Holy Ghost property and the big conservation area down off Angelica Avenue. And I'm sure there's others as well. So I don't know exactly how this master plan fits into that, but certainly the recently acquired properties should be incorporated. I think, well, I think that the open space, recreation, conservation is very important to the town, and so a lot of people do participate and learn about it. In the last 7 years or however long it's been, a lot of people are concerned about the solar systems that are going in and the lack of control over the solar arrays. And it's not clear what, if anything, we can do to control that given the way the state laws are written. But I think it's an important thing, because another element that is very important, and this is in the open space plan, are view corridors. So it's so easy to build a building and take away a view, and those views are part of what makes quality of life in the town. One of the participants mentioned what it feels like to be on Route 6, and it's kind of nice to keep Route 6 the way it is. And so I just want to say that there's some of that we don't have any control over because it's privately owned property, and you can do things, you can do what you want with your private property. But it's not only the properties themselves, but it's also how it impacts all of our perceptions of the byways and the town quality. So.
Thank you, Bonnie. And I just want to add that the master plan process and the open space recreation plan process are meant to complement each other. They're generally referenced in each other, and it's definitely considered when we develop the plan. Are there any pieces of land, sections of town that people feel like should be a priority for protection of land? Or I know there's a good amount of protection already in place, but I don't know if anybody had anything specific.
Or to go back to what you were saying before, are there areas that are currently protected that you'd like to see, for example, walking paths added to, or just bike paths, or any sort of recreation within those open spaces?
It's Bonnie again. I serve on the bicycle pedestrian committee in town that looks, basically our purpose is to make continuous networks of bikeable, walkable, actually truckable, big complete streets serve the whole town. We have identified North Street as one of the North Street north of the highway as one of the most unfriendly streets in town, partly because it leads to the interchange. It is a connector into Rochester and gets a lot of traffic, and there isn't a single sidewalk, and it's a narrow road, and people regularly speed. We have promoted a concept of linking and all the neighborhoods there are essentially little dead-end streets running to North Street, so you can't walk around the block there. We're hoping to somehow link those neighborhoods with trails, but our committee does not oversee a process for creating trails. So somehow the idea of walkable networks should be incorporated, I think, in open space planning, so that residents of neighborhoods like North Street, like Mattapoisett Neck Road, can actually have walking loops that take them off of the highly traveled collector roads.
Thank you, Bonnie. I think that's a great idea. Shirley, I saw you had your hand up.
I just wanted to say, getting back to access, I know the land trust works very hard to put trails through their properties and make them accessible and keep the trails open. It's tough with all the undergrowth and so on, and it's all volunteers, but they do plan the trails and work very hard to keep them open so that everyone can enjoy them, the space.
I second that, and I want to say that they almost serve as a Parks and Rec arm of the town. It's wonderful to have such a dedicated group of people.
It's always great to have people like that in town. Kate, I saw your hands up.
Yeah, I'm going to pile on with this because I live, just off the Neck Road, and there are 3 areas where there's land trust areas, and the plans are, the first one when you first come down the Neck Road, where you've got the old quarry, and then there's another one kind of at the base, kind of off the old Neck Road, where you go up and there's a little, I've never gone on that trail because there's probably ticks and it's kind of like weird, but I ride my bike around the streets. And then way down at the end, there's another little set of trails. And I feel like kind of people in the nearby neighborhood may know that these things are there, but I don't think it's widely known, and or that people would feel comfortable maybe, showing up in the neighborhoods. And maybe that would be something that we could either work with the land trust or even our own parks and recreation people to, make that more well-known and more welcoming, because I think that that's one of the reasons why people with families would want to come and be here. There's lots of things to do with little people, and those of us who are seniors and can still get around. I'd like to see the kinds of multi-generational small housing projects, not a giant 40B type of thing, but things where, people, like, you'd have these little green areas and there would be older people who could live alone, and then small families, and, I think it would just feel right. And see to it that people who grow up here could continue to live here, and people who have grown old here can stay, when they can't live in their 2-story houses with their big yards anymore. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, I think trails can definitely contribute to a good quality of life, and having people even just in town know about those trails and be able to use them is great. So I hear you on the promotion side. Does anyone want to talk about transportation? My favorite topic. So we've heard a little bit about Route 6. Serped did a study on Route 6 that Ed can talk about better than I can. We also have sort of multimodal things going on. So are there any major traffic or safety congestion issues in town? I know Taylor had that map up earlier with the crashes that showed, I think it was North Street has a good number of crashes. Anyone want to talk about their experiences with driving around town?
Well, I'll just jump in because I know Bonnie will say it, but We do have safety concerns, and it has been expressed by multiple residents on North Street and sections of Neck Road. They're big straight roads. They have, not significantly low speed limits, and it leads to some excessive speeding in some areas. So, Bonnie and a lot of volunteers have done their part to, we're applying for funding through Complete Streets to kind of find solutions on buying some speed signs and some other things and to improve it. But I do, as even the short time administrator, I've heard multiple concerns about North Street and Neck Road.
Thank you, Michael. I saw Cecile, and then we'll go to Shirley.
I attended several of the meetings when they came and asked us how we felt about Route 6 here in Mattapoisett. And I voiced the problem at the corner of Route 6 and Barstow Street. That is a very difficult section where you don't know if you're coming into the road or into the Ying Dynasty. And I was not the only one at the meetings that brought that out. So that's one area that I would like to see corrected if they ever take over Route 6 and do something worthwhile. So I just thought I would share that with you. And I did want to share also about the recreation and the land trust walkways and so forth. The bike path is it's coming. I live right near Goodspeed Island. So I'm there almost every day. It is coming along well. And also it's not only the bicycles, it's the pedestrians that are there. The beach is beautiful and it can be accessed very easily. So that's a good thing that's being done for recreation in Mattapoisett, to have the bike path. And I know there's still some more to come. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. We call them bike paths, kind of vernacular, but technically they're multi-use paths, and they're supposed to encourage a wide range of uses that are non-motorized. Shirley?
Pointing out problem areas, the junction of Grand Island Road and Route 6 has a crazy little wigwag right at the bottom where the roads meet. And there's difficulty getting in and out of there and aiming your car correctly for the direction you want to turn. It causes people to be backed up on Route 6 in danger, and people trying to pull out and nobody knowing who goes first and so on. So I just want, you said to mention places that were a problem. And I think that's been on a list somewhere to be fixed for years and years. But that's how those things go.
Yeah. Grand Island Road, and I've been on there several times. It's particularly narrow and winding too, just to navigate, and then to get out on Route 6, it is particularly difficult.
Yeah.
Anyone else with specific safety or congestion issues you want to talk about? And I want to remind everybody, you can talk about it. I said cars, but I really meant bicycles and pedestrians and anyone that needs to get from A to B.
I wanted to note that there's been a project on the books for a long time, the Main Street, Water Street, Beacon Street, Old Marion Road. This is not about the need. I think everybody's figured out what the need is and they've got a strategy. It's about communication. When we put a project out there and ask people for commentary on it, we have hearings and then everything goes silent as we wait, and the town really doesn't know what the next step is, this could be on any town project, that there should be a greater amount of communication about the status of projects that we've actually put on the boards and involved people with. So that's one thing. The other thing, and this is just information only, there appears to be a real live effort at the state to allow local, to create the conditions that will allow local control of speed limits on local roads. You know, don't hold your breath, but they're really talking hard about it at the state, and they may find the regulatory tools to allow us to reduce our speed limits in a year or two. But COVID could change that.
There was a law passed that allows communities to drop their prima facie speed. So traditionally that's 30 miles an hour. That's the standard speed on every road. Communities can now drop that, but there is an amount of paperwork and red tape involved in that, as everything else. But it is forthcoming, and it's sort of evolving as it goes. So thank you for pointing that out, Bonnie.
No, but well, I've had email correspondence with the state that they are actually looking to decouple the speed setting regulations from the federal. We are set to follow federal rules, and to be locally in charge, they have to decouple, and that's what they're talking about. So it's just information. There might be some relief in the future.
Okay. Shirley, I see you have your hand up.
Under the general transportation and circulation topic, speaking for the COA, it would be great if we had more public transportation. Years ago, the SRTA buses used to come through Mattapoisett, and you could ride all the way into New Bedford. And it would be a great help to the senior population if we could get some sort of public transportation going again.
I know SRTA and GATRA have partnered to sort of bring a bus that goes from New Bedford to Wareham.
Right. You have to stand on the corner of Route 6 and hail it.
Yeah. So it is problematic, but so you'd like to see some sort of expansion of service of public transport.
I'd like to see them come right through town, and maybe Church Street.
Okay.
So they currently drive by Route 6, and that's it.
Yeah. We kind of take that one corridor route. But
well, I can reach out to them. I didn't know that was happening.
I think it's on the GATRA website. We can definitely provide you with more information.
It is, and it's typically used for medical trips, so connecting folks in Wareham to the medical services in New Bedford. But because GATRA, which is the Greater Attleboro Taunton Regional Transit Authority, which is why you say GATRA, they operate on a flag down system. So you can literally just flag them down. If it's safe to do so, they will stop and pick you up, regardless of what the service is being performed. Kate, I see. Did you have your hand up, or is that just a?
That was an old hand up.
Hand, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Janice, go ahead.
One thought that came to mind while we were talking about the roads, the narrow roads and safety, and the bike path, the multi-use paths. I go up and down Neck Road every day, and I am just really fearful when they open up phase 2 in terms of what the plans are for safety. And that will be the same concern anytime, like, the bike path is crossing Route 6, and then it will be crossing North Street in terms of the safety of the public, the bike riders, and how that's going to work. I'm assuming that the people who are involved with the bike path are looking at it, but it's certainly on the list. You're number 3 in this area, that safety in those areas will be really critical. Especially since on Neck Road, the speed limit is 40 miles an hour right where it crosses Neck Road.
I've ridden that section myself. It is pretty fast, and I know a lot of people kind of go up there and cross Route 6 to go ride in Rochester too, which is really tricky. There has been discussion of what to do at that intersection. There's been a couple of solutions offered. There's a lot of treatments that they can do with bike paths now, flashing lights, that kind of stuff. I can't speak to specifically what the plans are for that. Bonnie might, or Michael might know better than I, but I know it has been discussed many times, and generally every time it crosses a road, that's something that's of concern to many people, and as part of, usually included as part of the project design.
I can speak a little bit just to say that I did have a meeting with Mike Larenko earlier this summer, simply to call his attention to the fact that we have a bike path committee, a bike ped committee, and a ad hoc committee to redevelop Industrial Drive. 3 committees who are dealing with the issues of bike and pedestrian safety, and it's a little bit much, and that we should be, so I'm going to put it on the table for the master plan, that we develop a much better coordinated system of communicating about every level of transportation safety in a reasonable way. Because 3 committees is too much, plus a highway department, plus a, you name it, it's just too hard.
Thank you, Bonnie. Yeah, intercoordination between committees and towns is a problem everywhere. Good to hear people are talking about it. In the interest of time, we have a couple more topics we want to get to. Let's go to services next. Sorry to throw you the curveball there, Taylor. Just adjust my list. Okay, so we did hear earlier from a gentleman who I believe is not on here anymore about the location of the fire department. How do people feel about how things are located in town? Do you know where the town hall is? How do you feel about the fire station, the police station? How do you feel about the location of those services?
I start. I think the location of the services was fine. I think the choice for the fire station is adequate, if not the best choice at the time. We don't have a lot of extra land that I would take the ability to take additional land. The town hall, maybe and issues with accessibility and the size of it. Also, I would wonder from a planning standpoint how many years are left in the life cycle of the building. It's a shame that the property next to it cannot be bought or taken to use for additional parking, but I know that is private. Other buildings, I think they're fine. I mean, the highway garage and other points, they're fine.
Thank you, Kevin. Kate, I saw your hands up.
Yeah, I have to agree. The town hall has probably got to be the next big project, and may even require a new building somewhere else, because they have squeezed every ounce of usefulness out of that building. And, you know, the parking is dicey and this and that, but it's, you know, it's an old building. It's a problem, you know, it's hard to get in and out. And I think it's probably not architecturally interesting enough to want to save it and kind of revise it. And maybe we should just, you know, think about recommending that a whole new building be built somewhere, and maybe along Route 6, you know. And I have no heartburn whatsoever with the fire station and the police station being right next to each other. It makes sense to me. So, you know, but I think there's plenty of room still on Route 6 for something that could be more user-friendly.
Thank you, Kate. I heard talk earlier about senior services. How are those located in town? Do they adequately serve needs right now? Or is there ways that can be expanded? Anyone? Oh, Shirley?
The Council on Aging, the senior center, is located, I think, as you probably know, in part of the center school that underwent extensive renovations not that long ago. And they were gracious enough to let us get out of the cellar of the Knights of Columbus Hall and move into the end of the building. It would be lovely to have a separate building, but I think there are higher priorities. The uses of the school buildings now is so up in the air with the plans for COVID and spacing children and trying to find usable space. I understand there was an idea floating around about moving, because the school population is down so much, moving all of the children into Old Hammontown School and turning Center School into town offices and moving the town hall in there. But I have no idea how serious that is or how difficult it would be to implement or what's going to happen to the schools, as I said now. But that's a thought.
Thank you, Shirley. Cecile?
Yes, I attended one of the town meetings where I believe a study is being done currently regarding the two schools to see if it's feasible to bring the children into one of the schools. They're not, until the study is done, they're not sure which school would be the school, and then they could consider the town hall in the other school. So I don't think we will know that. I think the study is probably for next May 21. They should come up with a report as to what the study has said, and then we could work from there. So I think that's just a matter of waiting out what might be feasible or not. So that's what I know about that.
Thank you, Cecile. It's good to know that that's on the radar. Be interesting to see if COVID has impact on that or not.
Absolutely, right. I know. They're looking for spaces now, so I don't know. It'll be interesting.
This is Bonnie. I don't know if Mike Larenko is still on and whether he knows if that committee ever formed. I was at that town meeting, and the town authorized that a committee be formed, but by the beginning of COVID, people who had volunteered for that committee had not been called to serve. So I suspect nothing has occurred as of yet, but perhaps someone here has more information.
So Bonnie, I do not believe anything has occurred. I will tell you that I am currently working on basically a review of all committee appointments and vacancies. So the timing, I guess, of this, it makes perfect sense. By September, the board has given me a time frame, through September, by the end of September, to have essentially every committee vacancy posted and every committee basically contacted in terms of determining when they can meet and then try to get the process started with some things. So I would tell you, if the committee isn't created, it will be created within a month or two.
Great. It's good to know. How about town services, like the website or town departments? Is there anywhere you can see improvements, or is there anything in general in town that could be improved? I did hear from Bonnie that communication could be improved. But also, Kevin?
I would agree with the communication, and I would say the website is probably dated, but I mean, I hate to say that should be something that, unfortunately, there should be something from the state or federal government that facilitates kind of a better platform for towns without the huge expense of each town buying it and building it themselves or maintaining it at a higher level. That's just an industry-wide problem. But I also think that some of the infrastructure around the town buildings, technology-wise, probably is a challenge, and that's going to be probably an efficiency gain if that could improve, or the fact that some of the town buildings don't have adequate Wi-Fi or connectivity amongst themselves, or have dependency on commercial vendors to provide that, is probably a concern.
Thank you. That's really great to know. We are sort of running on the 13-minute mark here. So if you want to go to climate change, I'm assuming in a coastal community like Mattapoisett, those kind of conditions are very important. I know that flood mapping can have a big impact on costs for people. I know that a good chunk of the town has FEMA mapping, which means higher insurance rates, things like that. Anybody want to talk about climate change or those sort of impacts? Janice?
I think that Mattapoisett is really facing some drastic changes in the future. The Globe last spring published an article about communities which will have lost substantial revenue, and Mattapoisett is one of 8 communities that will lose between 5 and 25% of its revenue to sea level rise. And we need to plan for what's going to happen with our coastline. There will be dramatic changes for sure. And we haven't had a severe hurricane since Bob, which was the early 90s. That devastated a huge number of homes in town. And the next hurricane, I mean, it's just a matter of time as to when we're going to have another huge hurricane, in addition to rising sea levels. It's a major issue for us.
Are there any parts in town that people feel are specifically very vulnerable? I know Crescent.
Coastline. The coastline is all at 0 above sea level right now.
Yeah.
So all of the development along the coastline is going to be underwater in the future. And the Boy Scouts a number of years ago went around and they posted on telephone poles where the sea level went up to during Bob and the hurricane of 38, I believe. They also posted that. And you know, certainly for a short term, for a short amount of time, Bob made areas totally inaccessible because they were underwater.
I have seen those signs and I was very curious as to where they came from. So thank you for the background on that. That's really interesting to know. I think Shirley, you had your hand up.
I just wanted to say all the more reason to assist the land trust in purchasing the marshland and so on that they're hoping to keep from being developed along the shoreline.
Agreed.
I'd like to just chime in on the work that the Boy Scouts did. There actually was a community-wide effort of climate resilience that was done 2, 3, 4 years ago, whenever it was, and there's our former town administrator was very involved in it, the library, a lot of people. So there's a lot of information there about resiliency. But I think it just faded into the background again, but there was a grant from the EPA, I believe. I wanted to also say that, just going back to our last conversation about, call it communication. I've lived here for 20 years and I feel that the town report is that I don't find it a good document for the annual town report. Is not very helpful in terms of the real information about what our committees are doing. And I wanted to make sure that got in there.
Thank you, Bonnie. Specifically, is there any like infrastructure, like bridges or roads or anything that are especially vulnerable? I know Point Connet's very far out there. Prospect Street. Is there any sort of bridges or anything that might need to be replaced if they were hit by a hurricane or anything like that?
Bonnie, I believe that the Water and Sewer Department is currently working on a plan to relocate the sewer that is right at the head of the harbor on Goodspeed Island. I don't know what the status of that is, but that would be a huge infrastructure improvement that needs to be done. And then the other thing is that there have been mentioned emergency routes out of places like Point Connet, emergency routes out of the end of, just how do people who only have one road in and one road out of those neighborhoods, how do they get out? We don't have a network of streets that gives people choices. So in an adverse weather situation, evacuation plans really need to be considered strongly.
That is an excellent point and a challenge for many of our coastal communities. Kate has had her hand up for a little bit.
Sorry.
I'll just add to that. The whole point is the emergency routes, planning for hurricanes, being able to get out, for example, on the Neck Road. If there's flooding, we can't get out. Anyone who's off the Neck Road, we can't get out. Obviously, it will recede, but over time, as the sea level changes, I think we have to address the eventual idea that those areas will be underwater. And so, you have to begin planning ahead and not make assumptions that you'll build seawalls or things that will try to stop it, but simply be aware that you're going to have to relocate those homes or those people and make allowances for new roadways and new areas that will have to be developed. And I think we have to consider that may be a real 20-year issue.
Thank you, Kate. I think I had Michael next.
All I wanted to mention was Bonnie is right that they are trying to move that sewer. The water has applied for an MVP grant. On the Neck Road, we've applied for a grant to look at the design of the culvert over there to improve flooding in the area where the mid-neck road where the water culvert currently is that causes massive flooding. And I would tell you, I'm not saying reality of those areas won't be underwater, but places like you're saying on the Neck and Point Connet, as Bonnie was saying, my concern is that if there is an emergency, those people can't get out of there. So, we still have to continue to be able to provide some sort of access to that road in case we do get a hurricane or whatnot. So, the position from at least town employees currently has been to try to raise grant money. Because I will tell you, obviously, the governor has talked about this significantly. He is providing grant funding to alleviate some of the concerns and attack some of these areas of concern. So the land trust got a big grant to purchase some marshland, and we do look at these things. But yeah, it's an uphill battle. But I would say there is some money that we have been received in the past that we're currently looking for in the future to do some more improvements.
Great, thank you.
Janice?
I've got one comment. Oh, is someone else speaking?
I wanted to mention that we don't even need to wait for a flood to have problems with blocked access. We had a huge amount of trees down on Neck Road due to bad windstorms that blocked the road for many, many hours. I couldn't get home that night. The road there were trees down all over, so it's not just flooding, but it's all the the wind damage that comes with bad storms, which we're just going to see more and more of. The other, I think the highway department is also, Michael, I think you could confirm, is working on these culvert issues that are all over town. They certainly got approval to redo the bridge or the overpass on Acushnet Road at our last town meeting, you know, because these things are old, the infrastructure, and they gradually are, you know, need replacement. They don't last forever. So the infrastructure question is not just along the coastline, it's throughout the town.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. The next question I would have is, are there particular areas in town that, you know, just every time they flood, there are flooding issues at particular locations?
That's funny. I think the planning board and the ZBA and all those people are very aware of high water all over town.
Just about everywhere. Okay.
Yeah, there's pockets that we are aware of, and as look, I hate to say it, but Town Hall itself is in a flood zone, and during Hurricane Bob, you know, there are pictures of it basically being section of it being underwater essentially. So I mean, you know, this risk of coastal resiliency, obviously, you know, as Janice said, it already exists, and it's only going to get worse. We have to try to figure out what the future is going to be and how we can kind of react to that. But yeah, there is definitely, you know, our infrastructure on roads and stormwater management, and in some sections we have a good job. In some sections, you know, communities were built or subsections were built, and the infrastructure for stormwater wasn't built to compensate for that. So the problem is, you know, funding for that. We use Chapter 90 funding for that, and we try to get I think Highway's done a pretty good job of getting the best bang for the buck. But yeah, I would say flooding in areas of town is definitely a concern.
One thing we haven't touched upon tonight, and you know, I'm looking up at my clock. I'm seeing we're about a minute away from 9, so I want to stay true to the 9 o'clock, get to bed hour. But historic sites in town, are there sites that you know of that are important to preserve that aren't currently preserved? And what does that effort look like in town? Is there a local group that's really active, or does there need to be one? And that's to anyone.
So I'm just going to say I don't know of any groups that are active. I would assume with a town this old, there should be more sites that would be preserved, but I'm unaware of what they are. So it's kind of, I would say that's a need, but I can't properly answer
it. The town does have a historical commission. I don't know if we have a historical committee, but we do get the CPC funding too for that. So the town is at 3% CPC, and you know, I'm sure Serpent knows, you know, we get a percentage of that for historical value. So, but yeah, we do have a commission. I'm meeting with them actually shortly, I think, but I'll have to bring up that conversation. I will say I don't know of a ton of historical sites within town besides, you know, I know the houses have their personal houses have the thing on it. The town hall has been there for a long time, obviously. But I don't know, others may be able to speak to that.
This is Bonnie. There's in addition to the historical commission, which is an active, not a very active, but a somewhat active group of the town. There's also the Historical Society, which runs the museum and is a nonprofit, and they've been very, very active. There used to be, there have been a couple of events celebrating Mattapoisett history. I think that the group realized that this town can only support a big celebration of history maybe once every 5 years, because it's a huge effort to bring all the volunteers in to make a big effort. Actually, the Agriculture Committee is partly interested in history, just because we do have a historical agricultural community. So there's, but I don't think that our town arm for history is particularly robust.
Okay. How about cultural events in town? Are there specific events that happen on a yearly basis that are, you know, just some of your favorite things that the town does? Or maybe you've seen other towns do it and you'd like to see Mattapoisett do it?
No, there's Harbor Days. I've been to a couple times. It's a really fun event. Sure, it got impacted this summer, but I know that's a big draw. Kate, did you have something?
Yeah, no, Harbor Days was what I was going to say, and it did not happen because of COVID-19. But that's really the big thing. I think the farmers markets are nice, but they're not, you know, it's not like, it doesn't bring people from elsewhere, I think. It's really more town oriented. It'd be nice to have Harbor Days in the summer and then maybe something else in the fall or the spring. But we don't have anything right now.
The July 4th road race, which is a very big deal.
Yes, good point.
My husband used to run faithfully, and when we first moved here in the late 70s, it was a turnout of about 50 runners, and now they're, you know, well over, I don't know, over 1,000. It's a huge event. It's a big gathering of people. Again, this year they didn't have it, but it's a very big event in town.
Well, and the river race also then too. I guess that would fall into that.
Yep.
Yep.
As well as that's a Memorial. That's a Memorial Day.
Memorial Day.
Event, but it coincides along with the Memorial Day celebrations, which I think are very important to the town. The parade is important. The school performances at Shipyard Park are very important. One that's close to my mind, I mean to my heart, is the Land Trust and the Friends of the Bike Path Tour de Creme. And we've been doing this, we were gonna be celebrating our 5th year, and it's a great source of fundraising for the Land Trust and for the Friends of the Bike Path. And it celebrates Tri-Town, not just Mattapoisett.
Shirley, I see your hand up. Thank you, Bonnie.
It's only for one evening, but we do have a town Christmas tree lighting, and I think it's the first graders or kindergarten makes the decorations for the tree, and the women's club sponsors a Taste the Town, where all the restaurants are in attend, and they have crafts for the kids. And Santa Claus comes in on a fire engine. So that's kind of a nice cultural thing.
With the town, are those types of events places where the town could perhaps communicate efforts that, you know, are ongoing? You know, would that be something that could be doable, I think? Take me up.
I think that all of these events are heavy on the volunteer participation. Actually, they're heavy on the volunteer participation, and in some ways, actually, they're heavy on the patience of the town. In it was last year, I think, that a new road race showed up in town, and I think that the selectmen decided to make a moratorium on events because townspeople were finding it hard to drive in their own main street. There's got to be a balance of, but it's hard to get the volunteers to staff these events.
Okay, that makes sense. It seems like we may be at the end of our program tonight, so it looks like we're going to rejoin the main meeting room. But I did want to offer one last opportunity. Again, if anyone has anything, last item they want to share, just let us know. I don't see anyone moving to the microphone.
But there is,
Oh,
there's one thing on the coastal resilience. I recalled that actually from that event a few years ago, or a study a few years ago, our town wells are vulnerable in the event of a 100-year storm. And I think a lot of people have their heads in the sand about, all right, well, the waves come in, they knock down my house, I'll rebuild it. But if their water source is vulnerable, it's a completely different story. So I remember that came up.
Good point.
Excellent point.
I would just like to thank everyone. I know you're going to do this later, but as a town administrator, I'm sure Mary will say too, the involvement is helpful for us. And if you can't reach out to Serpent through their thing, if you want to talk to me as the town administrator, feel free to drop by at any time. Or my number's, it's on the website. Feel free to call me at any time. And if you have any ideas or any thought process or any concerns, feel free to share them with me as well.
Yeah, and just we'll echo that very sentiment. Thank you for joining us tonight. Like I said, Sarah's going to actually, the way it works now is you would simply click the leave room icon down at the bottom right. Hopefully you see it on your screen. It should prompt you to rejoin the main meeting room. Just go ahead and do that. And I believe that Grant and Lizette may have some closing remarks for us. But thank you all for a really good discussion.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, the other group is already headed home. I wanted to just stick around and say thank you to those of you who were in the other group, and to simply ask you to, not go anywhere, right? So this is just the beginning of this process, and we'll need your participation and your input over the next 18 to 24 months. Please let all your neighbors and any groups to which you belong, let them know about this process. Please invite them to participate on the webpage, and keep an eye out for the next events. That's it, really. Thank you for your time and your effort tonight. All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Have a good night.